Applejack Owns a Musket by The Bandit 2000. Thank you for coming, every pony, Twilight said, beginning the meeting. No sweat, Rainbow said. Not a problem, darling, Rarity said. Oh, it's not a problem, Fluttershy whispered. Not a problem, Sugar Cube, Applejack hollered. I'm here too, Pinkie yelled across the room. Twilight smiled. Great, so to begin, Twilight's horn began to glow with magic as she lowered a screen and a projector. Twilight used the remote that was left on the table. She used it to show an image of Starlight sitting on one of the thrones, giving an evil smirk. As you all know by now, many different threats that we faced over the past few years or so, Twilight began to explain, switching over to a slide showing a group of dark changelings hissing at the camera, have started to, well, invade my home of late, she put bluntly, as well showing a small unicorn with a stupid looking haircut having a dark liquid pour from his eyes. And I was thinking of maybe having some form of defense might be long overdue, Twilight said, shutting off the projector, and seeing as how no protection spells work for whatever reason, I thought that I might get some ideas from you. Twilight pointed to Rainbow Dash. So, Rainbow, any ideas? Twilight asked. Rainbow gave a small laugh. We should learn karate. That will give them a run for their money, Rainbow proclaimed. Twilight nodded. What about you, Rarity? Believe it or not, I think we should go with Rainbow's idea. I know it can get me out of quite a few tight spots, Rarity explained. Besides, I hear all the boys love a dangerous mare, Rarity cooed. Twilight tapped her chin and thought, maybe, she muttered as she turned to Fluttershy. Do you have any ideas, Fluttershy? Twilight asked. You could hire some guards? Fluttershy suggested. Too simple, Twilight noted. What the hell do you mean, too simple? Fluttershy asked, confused, but Twilight ignored her and turned to Pinkie Pie. Any ideas, Pinkie? Twilight asked. Use a knife! Works every time, Pinkie said happily as Twilight raised a brow. Have you used a knife on any pony? Twilight asked. Pinkie's face went blank. No, Pinkie lied. Applejack gave a long, hearty, anime villain-sounding laugh. Y'all are going about it the wrong way, Applejack stated, turning towards Twilight with a grin. You should get a musket, just as the Founding Fathers wanted, Applejack proudly explained. The whole table stared at her in silence. What? Fluttershy asked. Applejack snorted. Let me give y'all an example, Applejack began. Say, 4 ruffians break into my house. I go upstairs and grab my powdered wig. Wait, you own a powder wig? Rarity so rudely interrupted. Yep, got it right here, Applejack said, pulling out a wooden head with the said wig on it. Rarity cringed at how dirty it was. Anyway, as I was saying, I run upstairs, grab my powder wig and my musket Kentucky rifle. I run downstairs and blow a golf ball sized hole through first intruder. He's dead on the spot. Whoa, Applejack, Twilight yelled. I just wanted a way to keep bad guys out of my home, not murder some pony, Twilight said, shocked that her friend would suggest such a thing. Twilight, it's not murder if it's in self-defense, Applejack pointed out. Besides, you wanted a way to keep ponies out. Well, here you go. Twilight frowned. Still, I don't want to kill any pony, she admitted. Oh, Twi, we all gotta do things we don't like, Applejack said sympathetically. But this I like to do, the farm pony admitted. Okay, so you kill the first intruder, but what about the other 3? Fluttershy asked. I'm glad you asked, Applejack shouted. I wish I didn't, Fluttershy muttered. Anyway, I switched to my pistol since my rifle only has 1 shot. I fire, but I miss him completely since it's a smooth ball and I nail the dog instead. Fluttershy gasped and covered her mouth with her hooves. Why would you hit Winona? Fluttershy cried. Applejack rolled her eyes as if the answer was obvious. She's an old dog, Shy, Applejack explained. She's gonna die anyway. But wait, why are you planning on missing? Rainbow pointed out. Were y'all not listening? Applejack asked. I said it wasn't planned. Why would I want to miss? But you said... Rainbow stuttered. Anyway, I have to run back up the stairs with my cannon mounted at the top. What? Why do you have a cannon on top of your stairs? Rarity asked, completely confused at this point. Doesn't matter. Anyway, as I said, I go upstairs to the cannon and then I shout at them, tally-ho, and light the rope, Applejack explained. I have never heard you say tally-ho, not once, Rarity stated. Applejack ignored her comment and continued her story. Anyway, the cannon goes off and kills 2 of the intruders, and the shrapnel from the grape shot blows a hole in my house and breaks a couple of windows in town, Applejack explains. But you're a couple miles from the town. How would that break windows? Rainbow replied. I think it's because it is really loud, Twilight thought out loud. Are we not going to ask how she got a cannon in the first place? Fluttershy asked. Or the fact that she plans destroying her house? Rarity pointed out. Hey guys, I'm here too, Pinky said, wanting to be included. Ahem, moving on, Applejack commented. Then I fix my bayonet to the end of my rifle and charge at the last intruder. He's standing there in fear and doesn't have time to react. The bayonet stabs his heart. He falls to the ground and bleeds to death as I laugh in victory. Applejack finally finished. And that is my idea. Any questions? Applejack looked around. The room was as quiet as the grave, as all her friends gave confused and dumbfounded looks. What the fuck? Muttered Fluttershy, finally breaking the silence. I have a question, Rainbow cried, raising a hoof. What are the founding fathers? Vanilla Cream Cake by Omegathist. Outside Applejack's barn were several tables with various cakes, cupcakes, and a moderately sized stack of gifts. Surrounding the tables were orange and pink balloons everywhere Applejack looked. Such an odd colour pairing, although Pinky ain't exactly a normal Earth pony. Applejack smirked at the thought, and watched as a much taller Twilight Sparkle was feeling her hoof around Sugarbell's belly, with Big Mac watching the 2 mares interact. Applejack felt her heart brightening with a glowing light inside of her as she took it all in. It had been almost 2 years since Equestria united against and defeated the Legion of Doom, and about 5 months since Sugarbell announced that she was expecting Big Mac's foal. Applejack glanced over at Rainbow Dash, who had her wing wrapped around Fluttershy, and expected that her new roommate was going to move out before long. Applejack smiled at the 2 Pegasus mares, and for her brother and his wife, knowing that even without a partner, Applejack knew that all of these ponies were here for her and her birthday. As she walked over to the fold-in table closest to her, Applejack looked at the biggest cake that Pinky had brought, a simple vanilla cream cake with vanilla frosting, and a 2 and 5 candled together. Applejack heard some pony bounce up to her side and knew who it was from the smell of strawberries and cream. Hey, Pinky? Applejack stammered. Is this my birthday cake? It sure is! Pinky hopped up and down. Isn't it perfect? Yeah, I guess I just thought it'd be something more like an apple pie or cake. Applejack shrugged. Well, I did bring apple empanadas, apple fritters, caramel apples. Pinky drifted off, and Applejack looked over and flinched at how wide Pinky's pupils were, like Applejack was all that existed in that very moment. But this cake is one of my favourite cakes! It's a bestseller at the Sugar Cube Corner. Huh, I'd have thought you'd like something with 50 different candies on it. Applejack laughed a little. like an explosion of sugar enough to get you bouncing off the walls. Oh, don't get me wrong, those are pretty good too, Pinky explained. And you'll try this cake soon enough, and I pinky promise that you'll love it. Walk with me? Oh, sure, why not, Sugar Cube? Applejack walked up the hill with Pinky bouncing beside her and felt the sun shining brighter on the trees as her eyes went up and down, with each time Pinky jumped towards the sky and landed back down on the grass. So, I heard Cheese Sandwich was back in town. Yeah, he is. Pinky stopped bouncing up and down and gave a strange smile. We've been hanging out a bit. And do you see yourself with him? Applejack spoke again as soon as she saw Pinky's smile fading. I figured as much. Don't get me wrong, he's really fun to hang out with, Pinky insisted. But do you remember how we treated each other when we first met? Competing to the point where I felt worthless as a party pony? Wait a second. He ain't going out of his way to make you feel worthless, is he? Applejack growled. No, not at all, Pinky gasped. But I don't want to feel like I'm competing with my special sun pony in the talent that I cherish most. You saw what that did to me. Understand, Applejack nodded. What about Princess Skystar? You got along with her pretty well. She is really cute, Pinky agreed, but she lives on Mount Aris. Plus, I have been thinking of some pony more different than me. Some pony more down to earth? Applejack suggested, and flinched when Pinky jumped in the air and grinned from ear to ear. Yes, exactly, Pinky exclaimed. Some pony that can show me that there's more to life than my parties, that sometimes beauty is in the simple parts of life. That does make sense, Applejack nodded. I swore that Rainbow Dash moved in to make a move, but I've been seeing her hanging out with Fluttershy more and more, which is fine, but would have been nice to have a mare friend to be part of my family. Family? Pinky nodded, staring deep into Applejack's eyes as she clarified. Family is very important to me too. How have they been, by the way? Applejack asked. Your other sisters find their special sun ponies? No, they've been taking care of the farm still, Pinky replied. Although I've wanted to move down there, there's so many more ponies to meet and talk to here, and I just don't want to see them just waste away, Applejack suggested, and noticed various strands of Pinky's mane straightening as she slowly nodded her head. The farm pony felt her head come up blank with what to do in this situation, and so she came closer and wrapped her foreleg around Pinky. It's okay, Pinky. I'm not sure how to help them without taking them away from the rock farm, but we can visit them and figure something out. You mean that? Pinky looked at Applejack, and their muzzles were centimetres apart as Applejack continued to hold Pinky in an embrace. I do, Applejack whispered, and barely had time to gasp as Pinky leaned forward, sealing the distance with a kiss that wasn't anything like Applejack had experienced before. All her life, it was just taking care of apples by doing this or that. Eat apple this or that. Everything was about apples. But Pinky's words became crystal clear as Applejack tasted an entirely new flavour on her lips. A bright and sweet flavour, yet tame and simple at the same time. Applejack couldn't put her hoop on the exact kind of flavour until she had returned to the party. Her and Pinky walking with their pelts pressed against one another as their friends rejoiced over the two mares getting together. Applejack then tried the cake and tasted the exact same taste. Sweet and simple.
I need you when you need me. What else more could someone need? You got a key and I've got a lock. Let's build a house upon a rock. Let's build a house upon a rock. And if that well runs dry, that'll never cross our minds. So bring on the aftershock. Let's build a house upon a rock. Let's build a
Far from the Tree by Sonic Sons. I'd spent nearly half a day trying to get my head on straight, and while Dash might have laughed at that particular turn of phrase, circumstances being what they were, the fact remained that I couldn't make heads or tails of it. I hadn't expected there'd be a fuss. Honest, we're family, ain't we? Apples to the core? And it's not as if Rarity was some no-good gold digger or some such. Granny knew her. Why, she'd been over the homestead dozens of times. Granny knew she was getting a good sort, didn't she? Then why would she? I sighed. Walking in circles like this, I was bound to wear a groove in the floor. Or in my own head at least. The kitchen was empty. Rarity had gone home, of course, and Big Mac had gotten it into his head to take Apple Bloom out for ice cream with her friends. She didn't say it in so many words, but I think we knew that Granny and I needed a chance to talk, and if it came to yelling, well, there was no need for a filly to hear all that. Maybe it was just a shock, I thought to myself again. That's all. Granny's just getting older and she's not fit for surprises no more. I stopped walking, but she wasn't so shocked when Mac told her she was dating Sugar Belle, so I sighed. So maybe it was what I'd been expecting from the first. Maybe Granny wasn't too keen on, well, certain things not found in the scriptures. It hurt my heart to think that. More than that, it hurt me to think of Rarity. I could see it with my mind's eye. I'd told every pony that Rarity was coming by for brunch. Granny hadn't had no problem with it. She served up apple cobbler and pie and some nice juicy corn with butter. The whole works. Rarity kept smiling at me all along, 'cause she knew I was gonna announce it. But I was waiting till the right time was all. I thought they'd be pleased as peach to learn I'd finally found some pony. Oh, I knew I might get a ribbon. Oh, Rarity, did they run out of fancy ponies? Well, that's just a crying shame. But it'd be all in good fun, wouldn't it? Truth is, they'd be happy for me, because I was happy. But when the moment came, when I'd taken Rarity's hoof in mine and told them all that we were dating, Granny Smith got really quiet like. Mac had smiled and said that's what he'd been expecting, while Apple Bloom started talking up a storm about how Sweetie Belle was gonna be her cousin soon enough. Hold on, Sugar Cube, we hadn't exactly picked a ring yet. But as time went on, I couldn't help but notice Granny Smith just sitting there, real quiet like. She tried to smile once or twice, but it didn't look none too convincing. And after a bit, every pony else got quiet too. In a moment, we were all looking at her, waiting for her to say something. Rarity spoke up. It's, good news, don't you think? I mean, honestly, I don't know what she sees in me sometimes, but we're really quite happy. I need to go, Granny said, and then she slowly walked up the stairs to her room. So here I was, half a day later, thinking to myself that I just couldn't stall any longer. I walked up the stairs. I knocked on her door. Granny Smith? I called. I expect this'll be a mite difficult for you, but we need to talk. Her voice was clipped and hoarse, as if she'd been crying. Come in. I found her sitting on the bed, holding a picture frame in her hooves. Granny? I started out. I wasn't sure how I felt about it even now. Granny, you made my mare friend right upset today at brunch. She didn't do nothing to deserve that from you. She's the loveliest mare I've ever laid my eyes on, and you treated her like a field full of weeds. She flinched at that remark, and I took a moment to breathe. Granny, I don't want to be mad at you, but you have to understand what this means to me, don't you? When Big Mac brought Sugar Belle home, you were crowing like a rooster all over town about it. But when I bring home a mare, She slammed the picture onto the bedside table face down and turned her head to the table. Her breaths were coming in quick and it looked like she was fixing to cry. I lowered my voice again. Granny, do you think that Rarity is a bad sort? She shook her head, still not looking at me. Granny, is it the fact that she's a mare? Is that it? She paused. She nodded. I felt my blood slowly starting to boil. Of all the things on this green earth, I never thought my own kin would be so... No shouting. Not yet, at least. Maybe you just don't understand. I feel the same way about Rarity that you felt about Grandpa Crisp. I don't think so, she whispered. I staggered. Yes, I do, Granny Smith. And if you think... She turned. That's not what I meant. That I'm gonna stand for. Applejack, please. I didn't mean... This kind of... I'm like you! The room turned deathly quiet. My eyes went wide. Granny was looking away again, crying. She tapped the face-down picture with one hoo. Look at it, she sobbed. I took the picture in my hooves and slowly turned it over. It was a mare I'd never seen before. See, she mumbled, I know you don't feel the way about Rarity that I felt about your grandma. 'Cause if you did... She looked at me. If you did, you wouldn't be dating her. Granny, you don't mean to tell me that... Your grandpa was a good stallion, you hear? He did everything he could for me. There were just certain things he couldn't do. I didn't tell him for near 30 years, and by then she was long gone. Went off to Manhattan. One day my letters started coming back unopened. And what could I do? Start over? At my age? She looked me right in the eyes. I wasn't brave like you. I didn't say a word. I just held her close while she cried. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'll apologize to you, mare friend. It's just that when I heard you was dating a mare, It's okay, Granny. I just kept thinking about God and Dawn and all she'd meant to me. I'm here now. We kissed in the orchard. She begged me not to marry him. It's alright, Granny. It's okay. You don't have to hide. You don't have to hide no more. After a long while of crying, she whispered to me again, her small frame still shaking with sobs. You have a beautiful mare friend, Applejack. I'm happy for you. I truly am. Just promise me you'll give her all the love she deserves. Don't hold back, you hear? Don't hold back. I promise, Granny. I promise. Apple of My Eye by Aurora Dawn. Applejack awoke before the first rays of sun had a chance to cross into her room. Her eyes snapped open out of a habit born from decades of waking at sunrise, and she smiled, groaning while stretching all her limbs out to wear off the stiffness of her sleep. She flipped her covers off and rolled out of her bed, landing on all four hooves. It had been a delightful sleep, and the morning appeared to be just as grand. Outside her cracked window, she could hear birds starting to chirp as they too awoke, and in the absence of any sound of rain grew Applejack's already blossoming smile. She walked quietly over to a dresser near the window, grabbed a brush, and pulled it rhythmically through her mane while she listened to the soothing hiss of a gentle breeze passing through the apple tree leaves. She stayed there for a moment longer than she needed to, relishing the private symphony of a morning where she was the only pony awake. She shook her head while glancing in the mirror and posed elegantly with her mane loose and hanging over her shoulders. The thought of Rarity and how she had always tried to convince her to leave her mane down made her chuckle. She bundled her mane together with a tie, then turned around to her bed. It was pristine, as if it had never been slept in, and she dropped her head and sighed. She turned her back to the bed and picked her head up, putting her smile back on. It was nice, wasn't it, to not have to worry about that? Nothing wrong with convenience, she thought to herself, and she pressed open her door to face the day. She entertained thoughts of a simple breakfast as she walked down the stairs, taking care not to let her hooves clomp too loudly on the hardwood, lest she wake her siblings. "A bowl of cereal and some apple chips," she whispered to herself. "I reckon that'll be a mighty fine start to my day." She rounded the corner of the stairs and walked into the ranch house's kitchen and stopped. Laid out on the table was a huge assortment of food. There were stacks of pancakes and waffles, chilled glasses of apple juice, fancy pastries and cakes, and even an apple pie with fresh whipped cream. There was not, however, any apple chips or cereal, and she frowned and sighed again while pulling up a chair. She grabbed a plate of pancakes and ate them resentfully, glaring in the direction of a small metal footlocker set underneath the sink. She ate slowly. Normally with a feast like this, she would have relished in it, tried one of everything, made sure to really take her time and truly taste the food. It was ingrained in her and her family to be grateful for what filled your plate, and she felt a little foolish to feel so disdainfully towards the meal she had been given today. Nevertheless, the feeling stuck with her. She finished and set her fork down quietly, hoping to avoid seeing the source of her consternation. Unfortunately, the sensors were exquisitely fine-tuned, and the metal footlocker popped open with a friendly ping that made Applejack's eyes roll. Out of it zipped a circular little thing, about the size of a frisbee, that spun lazily in the air with blinking lights. It hovered over to Applejack's spot. Above her plate, and out of 2 compartments extended spindly metal arms that grabbed the dishes. Applejack stared as the dishes were lifted away, and another arm, this one armed with a brush, extended from the robot and swept up the couple crumbs she hadn't managed to get on the plate. The robot tilted and chirped in recognition of the pony next to it and then bobbed away to the sink, where it turned on the water and the brush arm folded and reconfigured to a sponge. Applejack started again. She pushed away from the table and dropped to the floor and stomped out of the house, no longer concerned about the noise she was making. Apple Bloom and Big Mac did not need to wake up anytime soon, so they could sleep in if she had woken them. "None of us need to wake up at all," Applejack muttered on her way to the barn. There was a commotion of fluttering and a bird call above her as she glanced up to see a family of swallows fleeing another one of the robots, which was scanning apples with a sharp blue light. There was a beep from the machine as it finished checking every apple, a quick movement while it hung noiselessly in the air, and then another beep before it moved off to the next tree. It wasn't until Applejack had placed a hoof on the barn door ready to open it that she realized she didn't need to be here. She growled under her breath as she opened the barn anyways, hoping to find maybe some sort of comfort in the scent of hay and dust. The barn itself was filled with baskets upon baskets of pristine apples, all labelled and ready for shipping to various towns and markets. She walked up to one of them and checked the dirty notepad attached to it, and grunted in disgust as she saw she didn't even need to fill out the manifest. A thought occurred to her, and it caught her by surprise. She looked up at the hay loft above her, quickly recognising the bundle of cables that ran up to the gable, and she frowned momentarily. Apple Bloom would probably be upset, but Big Mac wouldn't mind. Heck, she thought, he may even be grateful. There was a chirp, and Applejack glanced behind her to see another one of the flying discs, dancing back and forth, almost foolishly behind her. She looked down to see she was standing in front of one of the metal footlockers. "Oh, sorry," she said, stepping back. The robot chirped and tilted in thanks and zipped down into its housing. She shook her head. Why was she apologising to these things? She looked up at the hay loft again and her eyes narrowed. She had made a decision. She crossed the barn and started climbing up the old ladder, paying no attention to how it shook and creaked under her weight. The recognition that she had gained a not insignificant amount of weight over the past month came to her, but she trusted the hoof-made construction. Besides, once she was done, she would lose the weight almost as quickly as it had come. She made it to the top and looked around, having not been up here since the sales pony had installed the little robots. All her friends had ragged on her that she hadn't gotten them yet, and about how helpful and useful they were. "You can't live without them," they intoned, shocked whenever they visited her and found they had to do everything for themselves again. Well, no more of that, Applejack thought. She looked at the old lumber about her and managed to hold back yet another sigh. The bales of hay were neatly wrapped and packed, and the floor had been pristinely cleaned. Even one of the old nails that had never stayed down when hammered back had somehow been put into place. Safe, sure, but soulless. She turned her attention to the stream of cables that ran along the inside of the roof next to her and walked beside them until she came to the access panel they all turned into. She stood up on two hind legs and placed her hoof on the latch, when a beep, almost angry sounding, went off behind her. She glanced to see two different robots hovering next to her, each with a series of red lights blinking back and forth. "What?" she said.
If maintenance is required, please contact support.
Came a tinny imitation of a mare's voice.
Tampering with the processing unit will void your warranty.
Applejack made a noise that was somewhere between a scoff and a laugh, and she pulled the latch and came down with the panel. She tossed it absent-mindedly behind her, hearing it clatter on the dirt below. She wasn't after the processing unit anyways. Within the metal enclosure she had opened was a mess of computer parts and wires that she could make no sense of. She looked around carefully, following each of the wires as they moved from fan to motherboard, power supply to processor, processor to module, and finally found what she hoped was the broadcast component. She opened a panel next to the first on the side of the communication system, marked with a radiating wave came out of. There was a large plastic rod sticking out of it, and the lights flashing at the base of it raced. The tip of the rod was rubber, and it stuck out through a tiny access hole in the roof to the outside. Applejack smiled deviously as she reached her hoof in, only to hear yet another beep behind her. No, it wasn't a beep, it was an alarm, almost a screech. She pulled back and turned around. 15 different robots hovered around her in a semicircle, surrounding her. One of them held the panel she had discarded, extending it to her in an arm, and the rest displayed those same warning red lights.
Please do not interfere with the system. We are here to assist.
Like Tartarus you are, Applejack said, turning back around to the open compartment. She reached in and grabbed the antenna and felt a shock. The shock had not come from the rod, however, it was on her flank. She barked out of instinct or reflex from the spook, she wasn't sure, and felt her hind hoof connect squarely with metal, and then something more solid. She glanced around her shoulder again. The robots had all turned to look at the one that had touched Applejack, which currently lay in pieces next to the railing she had smashed it into. They turned back to her, and then onto the robot, and then onto her again. "I just need a break is all," she said. "I ain't destroying no brain parts or nothing. Just the thing that sends you out, right?" There was a silence, and the red lights all turned off. One of them, the robot directly in the centre of the circle, tilted up and down as if it was nodding. "And it can be fixed easily if I just pull this thing out, right?" It nodded again. "So before any of you become spare parts, how about you give me some space here perhaps?" There was a pause before the 14 remaining robots all tilted and chirped, though there was a strange reluctance to the computerized tone that they emitted. They moved off again sluggishly towards their respective footlockers, and Applejack sighed yet again and pulled the antenna out. The processing unit let out a noise that sounded strangely like a scream, but it cut short and then went back to its typical clicking and whirring. Applejack gently set the antenna down, closed the panels, and then descended to the ground floor of the barn. She walked outside, feeling strange, and looked at one of the metal housings. "I suppose," she said while walking towards the house, already hearing Applebloom starting to complain, "that we all just want to have work to do. Poor fellas, don't worry," she said to the housing next to the front door. "I'll plug you in next time we have guests around." From the box came a small but happy chirp. The Strawberry in the Apple Tree by Art Inspired. The wind shuffles a few orange leaves by Applejack's hooves. She looks at her red barn and sighs while walking in. The memories of her visit to town are still too fresh in her mind and she scowls. She nearly loses her temper towards a heap of innocent haystacks, but Applejack calms herself down to the best of her ability and remarks, "I don't see why I've got to be the one to apologise to her, when she was the one that behaved way more toxic than I did." She huffs briefly for a few times and then says, "Okay, calm down. Okay, calm down now. What are you going to do about this to make it up to her?" The air around Applejack is fresh, and thanks to what little rainfall her farm has gotten, it also smells slightly moist. She considers the many different directions that she could take, but ultimately Applejack knows that all she really has to do, and all that she truthfully wants to do at the time, is to simply apologise to Strawberry Sunrise. She turns around vigorously and gasps with shock. This is because Strawberry just so happens to be walking into the barn just then and there. The sun's rays shine lightly on her red mane and tail, and she stops a few trots away from Applejack to say, "Hello, Applejack." The earth pony just gulps at her winged visitor and looks all around hesitantly. What are you even doing here?" Strawberry merely chuckles before saying, "Oh, sheesh, Applejack." With a roll of her eyes, she reveals, "This is going to be just a tiny bit difficult, but I came here because I felt like we shouldn't, Huh? Applejack asked. "Could you speak up? I can hardly hear you." Strawberry Sunrise then speaks up rather forwardly. "I just wanted to say, sorry." She rolls her eyes, although there's a hint of reluctance in the way she does it. "You see, Applejack, I realised earlier that I might have been a little bit too harsh. I mean, don't get me wrong, I really don't like apples at all." She even goes so far as to wave a hoof, and to that, Applejack just frowns. "Oh, don't look at me like that." Strawberry then stares with a hopeful grin. "What I mean to say is, I've never had one that I've ever necessarily liked before. I've heard how big you are on honesty and all that, so truthfully, I'd be willing to share an apple with you since..." She scratched the back of her neck. "I've, never actually had one from Sweet Apple Acres." Applejack asks, "You haven't? Well, why not?" "Because," Strawberry says as she hoofs towards Applejack in order to calm her down, "even as a foal growing up, I just never really liked them. Well, I'm sure that by now you know how much I absolutely detest them." Applejack nods, but wears an annoyed expression. "You painted the picture mighty clear the other day." She looks down and clears her throat. "I was having an awful week when you showed up, and I confess, I sort of took it out mostly on you," she scoffs. "Also, this isn't exactly easy for me to say, but the second you left, I wandered into the kitchen to find my father eating one of your Sweet Apple Acres apples." Applejack just gasps, but she also tries hard not to laugh too much. The farm pony asks in between her snickers, "Then what happened?" Strawberry asks rhetorically, "What do you think happened?" I asked him on a scale of 1 to 10 just how disgusting it is. He said that it was, she gulps nervously before finishing, delicious, and that I should really try one sometime. Standing there attentively, Applejack allows that to sink in. "You're really willing to do that?" She then shakes her head and says, "Nah, you know what, Straw? You really don't have to. I'll accept your apology if you'll accept mine. I'm sorry, Strawberry, for trying to shove the idea that apples are awesome down your throat." "That's no good though," Strawberry says. "I think that I really should just have an apple anyways. Again, I actually have never really had your apples yet." She motions some of her mane away to then state regally, "No pressure, right?" Applejack can't help but to feel intimidated by this lone remark. She can see where this could turn out badly for the two of them if she ends up accidentally giving the mare anything unsavory. She smiles calmly, however, and invites Strawberry. "Follow me. I think I know just the right kind that'll change your mind. Just you wait." They go by tree after tall apple tree until Applejack at long last brings Strawberry Sunrise to quite possibly the largest of them all. It towers, and as they slowly come up to it, Applejack begins to climb the nearby ladder. She also says as she goes along, "This here is what we've always called the forgiveness tree. We hardly ever have to use it, but any time we do end up using it, the ponies that have tried the apples that grow off the forgiveness tree have always at least somewhat enjoyed the crisp flavour." Strawberry replies, "Is that so?" There's silence, so she keeps talking. "Well, we'll see." As they reach the summit, Applejack lends the Pegasus a hoof and helps pull her the rest of the way up. "There we go, whew!" Applejack huffs while she wipes away from sweat from her forehead. "Alright, let's see. Which apple's just right for us?" Strawberry pants as well, but just waits for Applejack to pick out the best one. "Here we are," the farm mare joyfully voices, and she then picks the fruit with just one hoof after it's detached and yanked away from the thick stem it once hung from, and makes an audibly beautiful popping sound. Not even Strawberry Sunrise dares to deny its ripeness. It has a smooth surface and a perfectly red and shiny colouring to it. "Just to be on the safe side, you want me to take the first bite, right?" Strawberry just breathes for a few seconds, and then she nods. She watches closely while Applejack firmly sinks her teeth into the very edges, and all that's heard afterwards are Applejack's moans and giddy laughs of enjoyment. "Is it that good?" Strawberry asks. Applejack neglects to answer the mare sitting closely next to her. She instead keeps on chewing contentedly and starts cutting into the apple with a small butter knife. "Here you go," she tells Strawberry Sunrise while she generously hoofs her a yummy looking slice. "You tell me." The clueless earth pony then averts her attention back to the apple and begins cutting away once more. Upon returning her attention to her companion, Applejack receives a thorough surprise. "It's not all that bad now, is it, Strawberry?" A sweet and succulent end of Strawberry Sunrise's very own slice of the apple is gracefully inserted into Applejack's opened maw, and at the other end, Applejack initially expects to see Strawberry's hoof. However, that's not what's there at all. Instead, it's her cute, light yellow muzzle, and she's smiling blithely and lightly blushing. Strawberry's harlequin green eyes stare angelically back into Applejack's too, and for a moment Applejack is paralysed by her understandably modest though unexpected urges. Strawberry forwardly takes more of the apple into her cheeks and allows their lips to meet quite casually, but it's also very, very brief. Applejack clamps down softly and nervously breaks off her half and begins to nibble rather timidly. Strawberry is still directly in front of her, and she's smiling back at Applejack passionately and is watching the whole time. She begins breathing steadily and looks down at Applejack's nose for only a second. She then swiftly looks up and back into Applejack's dilated eyes, only to tell her, You're right. This apple really does taste incredible. Since she's still a little bit shaken by the way Strawberry has decided to forgive her, Applejack fails to respond right away, so Strawberry just keeps on openly flirting with her. Can I have some more? She finally coughs and holds a hoof up to her mouth and looks away while trying to speak coherently. You just... with me. I've never... but I thought you... on the lips? Strawberry just laughs, but she then calmly asks Applejack, You didn't like it then? Applejack goes silent, and her hoof lowers itself back down as well. Save for the birds, nothing else can be heard from where they are. So she says more calmly, Well, I didn't say that. You're actually, a good, that is to say... Giggling even more, Strawberry says innocently, If you'd like to keep going, Applejack. She flutters her eyes alluringly before saying, I sure wouldn't mind kissing you again. You've got to admit, that sure was fun. And if it makes you feel any better, I wasn't lying in the slightest when I said that your apples actually really tasted great. It wasn't anything like the ones I've ever had as a filly. Again, there's a calming silence in the air, but Strawberry simply waits patiently. I suppose. You suppose? Applejack glances at the Pegasus. I suppose I wouldn't mind one bit making out with you just a few more times. Her face turns red as a tomato while she speaks, but Strawberry doesn't mind this at all. To her, this only helps in making the farm pony appear that much more attractive and adorable. At first, for a second, Applejack attempts to hide her face with her hat, but Strawberry stops her with a hoof. She brings her face closer towards Applejack's and tells her, I'm glad, because I was worried that I had overstepped my bounds, you know. This time, while Strawberry's eyes are closed, it's Applejack's turn to sneak in a kiss of her own. Nah, but I gotta say, I've never met some pony that's quite so boldly assertive. That's why, She just starts blushing again and then says, I'm just not used to all this marshy stuff. Strawberry just laughs some more and then holds onto Applejack tightly to say, You might want to get used to it then, because I have a feeling there's plenty more mushy stuff on the way. Applejack asks, Yeah? Like what, Straw? The amorous Pegasus isn't shy with her advancements. Another kiss meets Applejack's quivering lips, and she's gently laid down on her back atop the wide and thick, though soft bark. Strawberry leans down carefully, and while their bellies touch every so often, so do their lips, and Applejack is taken to cloud 9. Everything becomes a romantic blur the more and more Applejack feels Strawberry's muzzle against her own, and eventually their tongues force open the blocked passageways simultaneously to get at each other too. Thanks to those two ponies, there aren't just sounds of birds frequently chirping high up within the sky anymore. Applejack and Strawberry create sharp and luxurious commotions of their own. They giggle together for a spell before hastily getting back into the action. Another smooch occurs following their laughs, and Strawberry then relaxes a little more to say, I've never, been with another mare either, so I'm just really happy to find out that you enjoyed making out with me today too. She swoons. I've never really felt like this before. Applejack lightly presses her left hoof against Strawberry's small chest and compliments. You're so beautiful, and I don't think I've ever felt this way before either. She kisses Strawberry once more before asking, If it's alright with you, do you want to keep going? Chuckling and then glancing away with embarrassment of her own, Strawberry Sunrise says merrily, Of course I do, Applejack. The two of them stay in the tree like that for a few minutes longer, and even as they start to climb down the ladder, Strawberry begs Applejack to bring her back to the forgiveness tree again sometime soon. I'm really ecstatic too that you chose to bring me here, she says while trotting along side by side with Applejack. These apples that you grow on this farm, they really are something else. An Applejack? Yeah, Straw? She kisses Applejack one last time, and she then states lovingly, and so are you. Broken Futures by Scarlet Ribbon. Sweet Apple Acres. Applejack had always been sure that the farm would never change, that her family would always be bucking apples. No matter where her family had lived, they always kept on with the family business of planting trees and feeding the locals. Applejack was always a hard-working pony, but she was also a proud pony, and the one thing she'd always prided herself on was the Sweet Apple Acres name. A farm that did everything by hoof to provide the best for the ponies around them, making apple pies and fritters, selling the fruit of their labours at the Ponyville market. But then the war changed everything. Suddenly food was needed, not just at home, but at places away from home. At first, the Apple family decided to continue as they always had, bringing food to market and feeding those close to them. It wasn't long, however, before friends were pulled into the war efforts. The Crystal Empire slowly consumed everything as it ruthlessly cut down any pony that opposed their march, and the Apple family was pulled into the bloody massacre. Cousin Brayburn was the first casualty in the Battle of Appaloosa. Big Macintosh had suffered the most with his loss, and it was Big Macintosh that first had the idea. The Apple family of Sweet Apple Acres was going to join the war effort. Sweet Apple Acres was built on growing and nurturing, not destroying and killing. Big Macintosh took a step back as Applejack advanced on him. I ain't gonna let you go killing no pony, she continued. I don't care what they've done. You're an apple and you're gonna grow apples.
We apples are strong, AJ,
he countered.
Equestria needs me on the front lines.
Growing apples ain't gonna help the war effort none. He was backed into a corner now, forced to sit down and retreat further from Applejack's deathly stare. And how's being a dead pony helping gonna help us here on the farm?
It's not about the farm, AJ. It's not about us either. Equestria needs us to help. If you knew what was good for you, you'd be going too.
Applejack froze. He had a point. The Apple family wasn't accomplishing anything by sitting back while others went to the front lines to fight. They couldn't even help the war effort from here, not even providing food. The apples wouldn't survive the trip to the front. She shook her head in defeat. I know, Mac. She sighed, afraid of what might come next. I don't know what we'd do here on the farm without you. I'm scared. Big Macintosh stood up and held Applejack in a tender embrace.
I know you are, little sis, I know. But this is what I gotta do. Can't sit here at home doing nothing. Cousin Brayburn died protecting what he loved, and I love my family. I love the farm. I can't live with myself knowing I'm sitting here without doing the right thing by you all.
Applejack just nodded, a tear rolling down her cheek as she gripped Big Mac in a firm embrace. Eventually, Big Macintosh released her and turned away. Tears had streaked down his face.
Now, I'm hoping you don't mind, he said, but I've got an appointment with the recruiter.
He pushed Applejack away and turned towards the front door, headed off toward Ponyville. Applejack felt alone and abandoned as she watched her brother trot away out of sight.
Cleaned out my desk at work yesterday. I haven't told Caroline, don't know what to say, so I get dressed up in my shirt and tie. She fixes me lunch and kisses me goodbye. And I drive around, but I'm going nowhere. Down county 2 lanes that lead nowhere, through endless fields of Bermuda grass, just spinning my wheels and wasting gas.
Her brother was gone, sure. He would get back to pack his things and head off to the front, but she couldn't stop him. The Crystal Empire would pay. Applejack wasn't sure exactly how, but she would make them pay. Determination burned away the tears in her eyes as she turned away from the door. She threw her building rage into a swift buck, slamming the front door closed and shaking the entire house. Something in the pantry rattled, and Applejack heard the telltale sound of food crashing to the floor. "Horse apples," she muttered under her breath. While the angry kick had vented her growing frustrations, she wasn't about to make another pony clean up a mess she'd made herself. Directing that anger inward, Applejack stormed over to the pantry to clean up her mistake. The pantry was a mess. A loaf of bread, a jar of honey, some canned dog food, and several apples were laying scattered across the floor. The jar had shattered, splattering honey across all of the lower shelves and making a huge sticky mess out of the floor. Applejack could hear Winona running, clearly attracted by the crashing sound. "Winona, no!" Applejack cried as the dog dove past her and into the pantry. It was too late. The pup was rolling in honey and shattered glass, somehow miraculously managing not to cut herself up. "At least the honey is good for cuts," Applejack mumbled to herself as she carefully extracted the dog from the pantry. Winona had done her best to get completely covered in the honey, but Applejack sighed in realization that she'd have to wash the dog before honey was tracked all over the house. Or would she? If she could keep the dog in the pantry, there wouldn't be the honey spread all over the house. Keeping a grip on the wayward animal, Applejack ran to the kitchen to grab Winona's bowl and a can opener, and she returned to the pantry, closing the door behind her. She set the bowl down and went to work, opening one of the cans of dog food. Cans. The idea struck her like lightning. The apples didn't have to fight in a war. They could support the war effort from home. Soldiers needed food, and good fruit was a critical part of their diet. Applejack took off at a gallop. She had to stop Big Macintosh to tell him there was another way. She needed to reach the recruitment office before he did. That proved easier than she expected. When she arrived, Big Macintosh was just sitting outside the office staring at the door. He cringed and shied away as he noticed her approach. "Big Macintosh," she called out, "we need to talk."
Yup.
He stared at the dirt, waiting for Applejack to speak. When she didn't, he decided to come clean.
I can't do it, AJ. I can't kill another pony. It's not for me. Even if it's for Bray.
Big Macintosh broke down into tears, and this time it was Applejack who embraced him. "I know, Sugar Cube, I know."
What are we gonna do?
He asked between sobs. "We're gonna grow apples, and we're gonna send them to war." Big Macintosh pushed Applejack away so he could look her in the eye.
What?
He asked flatly. "I was feeding Winona and then the idea hit me. Canned apples. They'll reach the soldiers and the soldiers can eat. We can help the war effort."
Jack, that'll ruin perfectly good apples.
Big Macintosh scolded her. "I know, Mac, but it's better than ruining a perfectly good Equestria, ain't it?" Big Macintosh and Applejack shared a long look.
I suppose you're right,
he conceded.
I wish I knew the road to you. I I don't care how far, I won't stop trying. I wanna be right where you are.
And so, Sweet Apple Acres rapidly grew into a canning conglomerate fueled by a war-torn Equestria and funded by a massive military machine of equestrian might. It had taken them a couple of days to convince the rest of the family, but they all eventually caved, proving one thing: war really does change everything, even Sweet Apple Acres. That crazy pony, Applejack muttered as she stepped into the house. What crazy pony? Apple Bloom asked from the kitchen. The one that showed up early today, claiming to know you. Where'd she take you anyway? We haven't seen you for hours. Applejack stepped into the family room, slowly taking off her work clothes. Yeah, she claimed I'm one of her best friends, and that we all saved Equestria from King Sombra before the war even started. Says Equestria is a better place, and that some pony changed the past, so it all went wrong. And then something about how this timeline isn't supposed to exist, and now she's trying to make things right.
I can't say there'd be anything wrong with that,
Big Macintosh commented, idly looking up over the edge of a newspaper he was reading. Victory of Manhattan, it declared in big bold letters. Really? Applejack? Don't you think that's a bit strange? Apple Bloom continued, carrying a fresh apple pie to the dinner table. I mean, she was an alicorn, right? If she's so special, why haven't we heard of her before? Don't know, Applejack replied, rolling her eyes. But if and she's right, I can't think of many things worse than what we've got right now. Supper's ready, Apple Bloom called upstairs as she set the pie at the table.
Their father stood up from the sofa and stretched his limbs. Well, I can't imagine things are any worse than this, wherever she's from, he said as he took his place at the table. She's probably just crazy, but I wish her the best of luck.
The smoke is clear. Sit alone with a beer and run through the rubble. Months of trouble in the end. The tears on your face, the sight of you walking away, and the memories drop and ring like bombs in my head. And I don't know if I could have done more. And I don't know if it was my fault or yours. So I'm still fighting after the war. My phone in the night could start the war again. Pull the trigger, press send and go. Catch a plane before sunset, kneel down and say come back. Say baby I was wrong, I need you home. But I don't know if I love anymore. I don't know if I loved you before. So I'm still fighting after the war. Well, there should be
too deserve apples by Short Skirts and Explosions. Here, in the core of everything she's ever cared about, the sky above is the same earth as below, and I can't imagine a more fitting place to corral her joys away. The moment my hooves touch warm, verdant grass, I see fruit fields and farmlands folding up beyond the horizons, for they are the horizons until they are not, and ultimately wrapping around to cast a ceiling that is simply another neighbourhood's floor. I pause in my approach to the nearby ranch, tilting my muzzle up and gazing at crystalline lakes and flowing rivers that demarcate the different emerald properties from one another, except they are all one property, belonging to one pony, and yet every pony, a family overflowing everywhere all at once, branching from and back to the one tree that ever needed to be planted. It's simple, it's beautiful, elaborate and warm, but first and foremost, it is simple, like she is, like we all try to be but fail. This is not my first time here. I pray to the prairies beyond that it won't be my last. My approach is as lazy as ever. This is a heaven where all the chores are done and all the meals are cooked and all the pies are baked and all the sorrows are shepherded off to shadows unknown. All measure of worry is sequestered into dark patches that I cannot venture to see. In such a spacious hollow of terrestrial splendour, precisely what illuminates it all? She does. Even from a gallop away, her radiance is blinding. I follow the music of her voice, approaching the epicenter of the realm, like a blind mare wandering through an enchanted forest. Every tree hangs with crimson bounty. The path ahead of me is rich with plenty, eternally awaiting a grand, rapturous event. I can taste the fruit through my nose, every breath, every heartbeat, delicious and pure, and her song saturates her playful drawl and welcoming warbles. Better not wait too long or they won't be ripe no more. Ahead of me, in a twirl and a toss of her mane, she hooves baskets full of produce to fellow equines and sends them on their merry way. She is living gold, full of freckles and friendship. 10,000 years have dusted the depths of my mind, and it's still not enough to fathom the weight of her generosity. So don't be too fastidious like y'all. Sit down and have your fill. Nothing is more delicious than the here and now. And if I do say so myself, I reckon it's all plucked as fresh as can ever be. Just fit for a princess. You can mark my words. Friends, sisters, brothers, they all laugh and thank her for her hard work and labour. I spot droves of ponies gathering at an endless picnic table that wraps around the world and back to where I arrive at the sacred entrance to a solitary ranch. There are enough plates to feed civilization 10 times over, and every juice-stained muzzle above its place is smiling, fit and full, but not nearly as much as her. Whoo-wee! Boy howdy if I done and buy her a dinner that served right on time. She turns, her emerald eyes sweeping, bathing, then cascading all over me. A delightful rinse, without fail. Well, good afternoon, Sugar Cube, she says, as if it's the first time she's ever seen me. All of the mortal innocence of that fragile, precocious world, hers flows the furthest. Are you fixing to have yourself a plate of beauties? If so, kick your horseshoes off and grab a seat. She winks, freckles like comets, flashing and returning and accompanying her country hum. There's plenty for every pony. 1,000 apologies, I say. I keep my smile reserved, a space beyond this warm sphere that cocoons her. But I did not come here to partake, at least not in the sustenance. Poof! Sustenance! She slaps her knees and guffers. Even a heart as old as mine lifts with each squeaky chortle. Did ya just fall off the train from Manhattan or something? The truth is a great deal more complicated. Wait a tit. She squints, those green pools bubbling with curiosity. There's a mighty fancy air about you, miss. Have you been around these parts before? Oh, I sigh, swimming. A few times. If I may be so bold, reckon you got a regal taste to your voice. I arch an eyebrow. Is that a fact? Oh! She jumps back so hard, her hat nearly falls off. Smack my brow! Miss Appaloosa! From that there pageant a few years back, you really did look pretty as a palm. What with that wreath of moonflowers you was wearing? Am I right or am I right? Another exhale. I can already feel this moment slipping. It only ever vanishes faster. I savor the last flicker of warmth with a soft breath. I would say that's enough of a truth to suffice. Ain't no such thing as a sufficient truth, Miss Appaloosa. She reaches into a bottomless barrel of apples and grabs a sample. There's the way things is, no stretch to it. She rubs the fruit against her fuzzy coat, adding an extra glint to its already immaculate shine. If there happens to be a call for a hiding and shaming, well, she bequeaths me with the apple, along with a motherly smile. All that needs to be done is for us to change, then there's no need for any other nonsense, you hear? I take the apple from her. The reflection on the surface has no face. I wonder who or what she sees when I arrive. If this Miss Appaloosa has nearly as much to regret about, as if it all too melts away nearly as easily when her consciousness drifts through this happenstance heaven. You, more than any pony else, deserves to know the truth, I say in a dull tone. Now just what you going on about, missy? She side chuckles. Namely the fact. I look up at her. I must be soft. I don't want this place to collapse as well. I've witnessed that too much over the eons. That you will be seeing far less of me for a while. Oh? Her ears curve. It's the first dip in her otherwise ecstatic countenance that I've witnessed since arriving. Duty's calling you elsewhere, darling? Quite the opposite, really, I say. My sister and I, we are retiring, for lack of a better term. Poof, please, sugar cube. The dazzle in her eyes is the same as her freckles. She hoofs another smattering of apples to even more visiting neighbours before pointing them in the direction of the equatorial picnic table. Just how can any pony retire from being a beautiful purdy cow filly? My heart falters. I almost lose my anchor, threatening to scatter this subconscious projection into a million broken pieces. Okay, now I've fully remembered what I will miss the most about this place. Such pure, unmitigated, heartfelt admiration for all that lives and tastes and works to live and taste another day. I suppose it's far too complicated to explain. I swallow a lump down my phantom throat. I can't revel in those emerald pools, not anymore, or else I might melt permanently into this place. And it doesn't mean that I will never ever return to this domain. Ha! Well, that's a relief. She leans back against a tree and tilts the brim of her hat back. A friendly face like yours would sure be ashamed to be missed out on regularly. It's yet to be determined who or what will take on the labours that I have personally seen to nightly since time immemorial. I gaze off at the horizon that bends to become the sky, and then the sunrise, and then the sunset, and then back here. And it won't be my first sabbatical, as it were. a delicate breath. I was gone for a very, very long time before. The way I see it, she shrugs before plucking a string of grass from the soil below and chewing it betwixt her teeth. As long as you're sure of yourself and what you're doing for other ponies, then you're right where you need to be. This is followed by a sharp wink and an even sharper smile. But you'll be missed something awful all the same. I look at her straight. It is here, in this sanctum that she's conjured, that I somehow feel the smallest. If only she knew what brought me back here. If only I could say it. It fulfills me. She cocks her head curiously at that. Miss, all those years that I was gone, all the generations abandoned under the veil of abject darkness, I was not certain just what state of collective subconscious I would return to. I had pondered over the countless nightmares that had been fostered in my absence, the terrors and fears and abysmal pits that I would have to rescue so many hapless minds from. And then, on the first night of my governance, the first trot I made was to hear. Is that so? Her ears twitch, awaiting a crown perhaps. Except she already has one. I should not be any more humbled. Was it everything you hoped for? It was. I start. It is. I stumble. Warm. I gaze off, imagining a new moon, forever frozen in darkness, save for the tears, frozen, still there, warmer than any flame of war in all the wretched world's epochs, and a click of the tongue, dull music compared to her. I realized the nightmares were only ever me. Now, that don't seem quite right, Miss Appaloosa. Her face is long, soft, a new pool to drown this hollow home, and perhaps that's why it ever had a vacuum to begin with. It was in want of apple filling, delicious and wholesome in all the right places, so that there's no room left for any doubts. You seem like alright pony folk to me, and even if you've made a few mistakes along the way, reckon you ain't nothing so big that can't be fixed. And so I came back. I looked at her again, the tiniest I've ever been, a little pony in her shadow, perhaps a seed to contemplate the tree she branched from, but ultimately hopeless, wanting, weaning, again and again and again. I could not help myself, I suppose. You have given me so much hope, merriment, and truth these past few years of night, Miss Applejack. I stand as tall as I can, which is also deliciously futile, but it no longer pains me. A portion of this upcoming retirement is to measure ourselves among mortals. My sister and I can't thank a more apt teacher. I wish there was a way I could properly thank you, especially since I won't be blessed with visiting a place quite as often as I desire to. She merely shakes her smiling head. No need to go into all that hogwash, ma'am. She pulls her hat off and bows. Gold touches earth, and the sky ripples with her voice. It's simply our hospitality. I smile, and what fine hospitality it is. Now, she stands back up from the tree, slaps her hat back on her head, and motions towards the barn. Since we've gotten that out of the way, why don't you join us for some good old-fashioned hold-down? Every pony from 100 towns over have come to join the fun. Would be ashamed to miss it. I'm afraid I cannot, I say. I must be departing now. Ah, well, the moment you come back to this here ranch, Miss Appaloosa, you'll be as welcome as the moon in June. I open my eyes. A marble floor stretches beyond the throne. Dim blue torches illuminate a stretch of polished granite that frames a balcony overlooking the equestrian countryside. Starlight bathes the pastures and fields in the shadow of the Canterlot Mountains. Somewhere a tiny speck amidst the great grey malaise of it all. A little pony dreams not of yesterday's life or tomorrow's death, but of now, the space between beats, and the warmth of excitement that comes with contemplating just how right everything is when you're exactly where you need to be. I know.
So pour me one more glass of dandelion wine. Preachers and dreamers, they both believe in the patterns and powers that we can't quite see. You can spend your life guessing or look for the signs. Sit back and sip on that dandelion wine. Oh, my life, I've known some things you can't control. You can make plans, but they'll change most times. So pour me one more glass of dandelion wine. Pour me one more glass of dandelion wine. You can make plans, but they'll change on a dime. So pour me one more glass of dandelion wine. Pour me one more glass of dandelion wine.
I Ain't Got No Accent by Connor Cogwork. When Rarity is overwhelmed with making designs for an agriculture expedition, she turns to Applejack for advice, but when she gives Applejack a hairstyle treatment in return, the apple farmer lets her accent slip from a southern drawl to sophisticated Manhattanite. The result? More fancy parties than you can shake a candy apple at. Carousel Boutique was currently a seamstress's nightmare. There was a reason for this. Not 3 minutes ago, the proprietor of the establishment had a visit from a very influential customer. Said customer had congratulated said proprietor on a commissioned piece that was made for an upcoming agriculture expedition. They were impressed enough that they wanted the proprietor to join them at the expedition and showcase their wares. The proprietor had said yes. Now the proprietor is wondering what in Celestia's great kingdom she's gotten herself into. Let's watch, shall we? I can't do this! Rarity had been panicked before, delusional, worked to the bone, but outright clueless hysterics was a real rarity for her. What was I thinking? She ranted, pacing her shop floor with a haunted look in her eyes. Spread across every spare surface of the boutique were dozens upon dozens of paper scraps, each one with a differing dress design. Here and there, her mannequins had pieces of cloth pinned to them in haphazard shapes. The only other living being in the shop with the unicorn was a chubby white Persian, who battered a stray piece of paper every now and then, but otherwise seemed uninterested in whatever it was Rarity was spouting at her. The Equestrian Agriculture Conference and Expedition is one of the biggest gatherings of some of the richest ponies around, outside of the Grand Galloping Gala, Rarity continued, glasses askew on her muzzle. I would be a madman to let this chance to showcase my abilities pass. But oh, Celestia, Opal, what do I make? Her eyes roamed the countless sketches that were littered around her. Farmers, harvesters, millers, woodcrafters, work ponies, and chefs. They're all such no-nonsense types. How can I possibly design anything that would appeal to them? The chefs, maybe, but that's such a narrow range. Oh, I must simply figure out something. The expedition is only 2 weeks away. With a melodramatic sigh, she sat in front of her desk, 4 limbs splayed out atop the surface. Opal sat herself next to one of the white hooves and looked at Rarity expectantly. "Oh, I know, Opal, I have to get a hold of myself, but really, I told Mr. Marmalade that I would be prepared with 10 of my best dresses, while in reality I've only got 2 in stock that would even remotely fit in, and one of them I'd rather not have see the light of day again," she grumped, crossing her hooves and resting her chin on them. The cat gifted her with an offended glance, before nonchalantly trotting over to a dark blue bundle of fabric, leaping onto it and tucking her paws in, taking extra care to shed an extra few white tufts of fur onto its surface. Yes, you're right, I've got to move past this funk," the designer quipped, lifting her head back up. "I've bounced back from worse than this. Surely I can rise to the challenge. Yes, I'm sure I can." The burst of good mood was quickly dampened by a bout of rational thought. "Oh, who am I kidding?" Telekinetically grabbing Opal from her perch and burying her face into the frustrated feline's fur. "I can't possibly know what goes through a farmer's mind when they see an outfit like mine. The only one I could ever get an opinion from." She was interrupted by a rapid knocking at her door. She dropped Opal, who scampered off to safety. With a quick wipe of her eyes and an adjustment to her glasses, Rarity trotted towards her entrance, quickly banishing her earlier mood for a later date. "Coming!" The handle lit up, and the door swung open. The white unicorn stood, closed eyes and a smile to her face. "Welcome to Carousel Boutique. I am Rarity. Is there anything I can help you with?" "Y'all can start by not doing that every time I come round, you know," said a familiar light-hearted southern twang. "Applejack!" the unicorn exclaimed, letting her eyes snap open. Indeed, it was the orange farmer filly, customary hat perched on her head, and a saddle pack strapped to her midsection. "What brings you to my shop today?" "These do," AJ replied, motioning her head towards the pack. "I recall Sweetie Belle asking for a right big case of these apple fritters last time I brought 'em to one of Pinkie Pie's parties. I couldn't rightly say no to her little old face, so I baked up a bunch of them this morning. Can I come in and drop 'em off?" As Applejack continued to speak, Rarity found herself straining harder and harder to resist speaking out against the Applebucker's atrocious grammar. I know she was raised on a farm, she told herself, but she could really have a better handle of the equestrian language than that. Even Rainbow Dash has better diction. She kept silent, however, and as the question was asked, she put out her best smile and stepped back. "Of course, dear, just leave them on the counter. I'll be sure Sweetie Belle sees them when she gets home from school today." "Much obliged," was the reply she got, as the farm pony trotted inside. As the unicorn closed the door behind them, there was a pause before addition. "What in tarnation happened here? You working on another dress, Rarity?" Her mess of papers had been spotted. There was a sigh as the white one turned around to look at her friend, catching the orange equine looking at one of the papers in particular. There was a moment of blankness, then a moment of scrutiny, followed by a moment of enlightenment. "Applejack!" the dressmaster gasped out breathlessly. The farmer turned her head to look at her friend. "Yeah?" The next portion of the conversation did not involve words so much as it involved a unicorn tackling an earth pony with a rib-shattering hug, all while screaming out, "Applejack, you really are an angel in farmer's clothing!" Applejack would only wince as her spine popped, before croaking out, "Beg pardon? I don't know why I didn't think of it earlier, but you're exactly what I need. With your eye for the practical and my fashion knowledge, surely we would both be able to get all these dresses done in 2 weeks' time before the expedition even starts. Oh, Applejack, I just can't believe what good fortune brought us together on this day. It must be destiny." "Whoa on there, partner," the farm pony drawled before managing to push Rarity off of her. "Y'all want to back up there and explain to me why you mentioned me and dresses in the same sentence." "Oh, I do apologize," the unicorn said, straightening her glasses again and calming down. "But I really do need your help. You see, I had a customer earlier today. He was quite overjoyed with one of my creations, you see." There was a roll of green eyes which was caught. Now, let me finish." He was so enthralled by my design that he asked me to accompany him to set up a display at this year's Equestrian Agriculture Conference and Expedition. Now she had the orange pony's attention. The EACE? Wow-wee. That there's the cream of crop for all the farmers over Equestria. I'd love to set up a sweet apple acres cart there, that's for certain. I bet I'd even do real business this time round. A dark look crossed her face as memory of the Galloping Gala fiasco resurfaced. At least those ponies know a good apple when they see one. Indeed, Rarity chuckled, before she became all business again. However, the dilemma I'm faced with is simply that I've never made a whole line of outfits directed towards the farming and agricultural community. And I need to have 10 different dresses, and I need to have at least 10 different dresses and suits ready in time for the expedition, which is going to be held in 2 weeks. There was a low whistle, while at my whiskers, y'all sure do have your work cut out for you. Don't you still have the 2 outfits y'all made for me? I think they'd be surefire popular with the convention folks. I was planning on using your gala dress, the white pony started, though she pawed at the floor with her hoof. But the other one, I mean, I know your expertise went into its design, but do you really think it would be popular at the expedition? Well, it could probably do with an overhaul, but yeah, with a little fixin', it'll be a right good hit, I'd reckon. Now Applejack got on all 4 hooves as she clopped over to Rarity, an eager look on her face. Well, what'd you need my help with? I ain't any good with needle and thread, you know, but if you're looking for what a farmer looks for in an outfit, she gave a wink, hinting at an unspoken request. The unicorn's eyes shimmered with gratitude, and the farm pony had to brace herself for another bone-crunching hug. Oh, thank you, Applejack. I'll be sure to tell my client that I'll be bringing another pony with me for personal refreshment. There'll be no way he could possibly refuse, especially after he tastes some of your famous apple fritters. She released her hold on the poor apple bucker and gave her a long, thankful gaze. You can't believe how much this means to me. 'Tain't nothin', Rarity. Now, if y'all don't mind, I'd appreciate you letting go of me, and let's getting down to business. There was a pained smile. Okay, tell me again why we doing this? It's simple, Rarity began, as she levitated a brush over to her subject's mane. If you and I are going to be working together, the both of us need to be on level ground. And while I may not be afraid to get my hooves dirty, unarguably, the one who needs the most grooming is you. So before we get started on any kind of dress, we need to make you good and presentable. Applejack groaned, but made no move to budge. She had taken a shower that morning, and was grateful that her friend hadn't seen the need to inundate her in a sea of bath salts and exotic perfumes. However, she was unable to get away from a good mane combing, and so she stared forlornly at a stuffed mannequin that was wearing her pappy's hat and hairband. I can do this, she thought to herself. Rarity's giving me a chance that I won't be able to get otherwise. I just need to hold out and let her do what she feels is best, even if it is, or rather, frou-frou. The unicorn made a humming sound as she brushed the knots of the farmer's blonde hair. She tilted her head and studied the fall of golden strands for a moment. Then, with a smile and a whim, she levitated a spritzer bottle over and began to douse the apple bucker's mane. Now, hang on there, A.G. started, alarm creeping into her voice. Don't you go cutting anything, you hear? I'd like to keep it for the show, if you know what Relax, Applejack, Rarity soothed, placing a hoof on her shoulder. She was trying hard not to turn the reassurance into a critique on grammar. I'm only having a bit of fun. I won't cut anything, I promise. But you'll look so more high class after this, I tell you. High class, sophisticated. She's just having fun, the earth pony told herself. 'Tain't anything permanent. Just relax. She found herself grimacing at the brushing. After a minute or so, the white one stepped back from her work and gave Applejack an appreciative smile, before motioning her to turn her head one way and then another. Perfect, she beamed. Now it just needs one last touch. Ah, I know. A nearby wardrobe opened up and a box floated out of it. As it stopped by the unicorn, the top hovered upwards and the contents floated out. A gold necklace with a bright pale blue gemstone embedded in the center. It took the orange pony a second to recognize it as Rarity's element of harmony. This is just for now, Rarity stated before the necklace floated to Applejack and secured itself around her neck. Perfect! Okay, Applejack, come on over here. She got to all fours and followed her friend over to the other side of the room, where a full-length mirror awaited. With a triumphant grin, the unicorn pulled it in front of her subject. Behold! A diamond in the rough! AJ could not believe her eyes. It wasn't so much that her friend's element was hanging around her neck. It was the hair that had her attention. Styled up in a bun, bunched up, leaving only a small amount hanging down her neck and in front of her eyes. Last time her hair had been like this, it was back when she was a filly. She saw her younger self in that reflection. Young, sophisticated Manhattanite Applejack. The necklace gave her an air of elegance that suited the adult form that was looking back at her. Dear Celestia, what would Aunt and Uncle Orange think of her now? She found herself speaking in Manhattan to have been the hardest part of being sophisticated. Could she even do it still? She wasn't certain it would look right to have a regular voice tumbling out of the visage in front of her. What was one to do? She found herself clearing her throat. I say, what a wonderfully exquisite look you have there, madame. Is that necklace what I think it is? Oh my, it looks it, doesn't it? An element of harmony. Oh dear, you must simply tell me the tale of how you obtained that rare prize. It would be an honor to have you as my guest. She smiled at herself. That wasn't too hard. Thump. She turned her head to the source of the noise, in time to see Rarity doing an impressive impression of a snake who had unhinged her jaw from her head and had allowed it to drop to the floor. On top of that, she had somehow managed to make all colour disappear from her irises, the pupils having shrunk to tiny black dots. Dots that were locked on her. Oh, crab apples! Applejack cursed to herself. I just said all that out loud, didn't I? She took a hesitant step towards her friend. Rarity? She asked, her normal twang back in place. There were a couple of blinks before the jaw ascended and locked itself back into place. Applejack? She stammered, eyes still riveted on the earth pony. You all right, Sugar Cube? I don't... Applejack! The unicorn appeared to be grasping for breath. Your voice! How? When did... Applejack looked down, a guilty look now on her face. I don't reckon I ever told you the story of how I got my cutie mark, have I? You've been to Manhattan? I told ya, the earth pony answered, a frustrated blush on her cheeks. I was just a silly little filly at the time. I didn't know any better. Applejack, please! Rarity rolled her eyes disbelievingly. Do stop talking about going to one of the most cultured cities in all of Equestria, second only to Canterlot, as if it was some sort of big mistake. But it was, AG argued. If I hadn't seen Rainbow Dash's sonic boom when I did, I'd probably still be stuck up there, in some frou-frou dress, high nubbin with my aunt and uncle. And where would the farm be then, huh? Apple Bloom. She would have grown up without ever knowing her own sister. I barely escaped from that city with my life. And ponies say I'm the melodramatic one, the dressmaker sighed under her breath. Listen, AJ, nobody can disagree that you made the right choice in going back to your farm. I'm certainly not in the least. What I am confused about is why you've buried all your proper high-class training your Orange family gave you after you came back. 'Twa'n't me, the farmer replied, her eyes now directed to the shop floor. All that sophisticated nonsense didn't do jack squat for me in the end. And how exactly would I go about using it on the farm? Better to forget the whole thing ever happened. Oh, no, was the comeback she got. My dear, you simply do not know the tools you have at your disposal. This was quickly followed by the unicorn rushing over to her and taking her hooves into her own. If you could use that cultured grammar in presence of royalty and the rich, you could have doors open to you that you never would have believed. Oh, darling, let me hear it again. You must not have used it in so long, and yet there was no hint of your accent. Accent? What accent? Rarity blinked. Why, I mean your everyday speech, Applejack. Surely you don't. There was a honk of noises as the orange equine leaned in and gave her an emerald glare. What you talking about, Rarity? I ain't got no gosh darned accent. She raised a hoof and was about to comment on the impressive stringing of a double negative, but it was then that there was a quick rapping at the front door. She gave Applejack a shush motion before trotting over to the entrance and opening up. Greetings and welcome to Carousel. Oh, Mr. Marmalade, what a pleasant surprise. The unicorn backed up and allowed a tall, burnt orange stallion to trot inside, a short-trimmed brown mare and tail swishing behind him. Besides the overcoat he was wearing, he had a cutie mark of a jar of jam. Madame Rarity, I do apologize for the intrusion, but I just simply could not contain myself. I had heard word of your legendary speed in your craft, and so I wondered if you already had any designs sketched out. Oh, she pawed at the ground and glanced over at the pile of papers that the mess from earlier had been hastily arranged in. I've got several ideas on paper, yes, but nothing final. She quickly glanced around her shop before letting her eyes rest on her blonde companion. Oh, I was just consulting with an expert in the agricultural field before I decided on anything. Let me introduce you. Applejack had been watching the entire exchange in silence, trying to make herself unobtrusive. However, her endeavour in stealth was quickly put to pasture as the unicorn brought the dapper male over to the mirror. This is a close friend of mine, Rarity began, her voice filled with pride. She owns one of the biggest apple farms this side of Canterlot. She may be a little rough around the edges, but trust me, she's absolutely divine. My ears are burning over here, Sugar Cube, AJ thought to herself. I say, Mr. Marmalade exclaimed, allowing his eyes to roam up and down Applejack's form, causing the filly to blush slightly. What a picture of elegance! Hard to believe that you're a farmer. What's your name, madame? My name? There was a motion to the stallion's right. Rarity was shaking her head, a panicked look in her eyes. AJ raised an eyebrow. What did she want? Now the unicorn had brought her hooves up together, in prayer form, a pleading look on her face. Beads of sweat were appearing on her brow. Oh, that's what she wants. The entire exchange appeared to have gone unnoticed by Mr. Marmalade. The farm pony turned socialite gave herself a silent sigh, before clearing her throat and again letting the Manhattan out. My name is Applejack, good sir, and you must be the client that Rarity has told me so much about. Oh, was the response she received, his face lighting up in pleasant surprise. So cultured for one so young. Yes, I am that same said client. My name is Mr. Mango Marmalade, and I run a preserving facility outside of Philadelphia. I have a spot reserved for me at the EACE. Perhaps you've heard of it. It was exactly this kind of high-powered boasting speech that grated on the farmer's nerves in the first place, but she simply nodded. I have indeed, sir. Every farmer pony in Equestria worth their apples has heard of the expedition. I myself would love to attend and display my own wares. Applejack is the proprietor of Sweet Apple Acres, Rarity spoke up, trotting over to one of the saddle packs that was brought in earlier. A flap opened, and out came a warm apple fritter. Her skills in the ways of apples and baked goods are simply unparalleled. She arrived here this morning with a pack of these apple fritters. I insist that you try one, Sir Marmalade. You won't regret it. Applejack grinned, silently berating herself for the slip-up. This does smell exquisite, the stallion breathed as the fritter was floated over to him. He took it in his own hooves, and daintily he took a bite. There was much chewing and humming. Before his eyes opened in amazement, the rest of the treat vanished at a speed that would have even amazed certain blue pegasi. Marvelous! He boomed, before reaching for the apple farmer's hooves and holding them in his own. Madame Applejack, that treat was simply amazing. Should Miss Rarity wish to bring you to the expedition, make no mistake, I would be in full 100% backing of my decision. Why, I'll even rent out extra space for your own stand. Oh, so much to do. The mares could only stare as the business pony paced the floor in apparent excitement. I have to call the management. Oh, I must simply inform the caterers too. They'll have to be able to coordinate with your people. I wonder if the people next to us would lend out their spot. If not, I'll simply buy them out. He suddenly turned and galloped towards the door, any earlier intention of seeing dressed designs now having fully blown away on the breeze. I apologize, mesdames, but there is so much to do in order to properly prepare. I shall return when I have all the arrangements secured. Until then, toodaloo, my dears. Toodaloo, Rarity and Applejack echoed, waving their foreheads with blank expressions on their faces. The boutique doors squeaked slightly from the stallion's hasty departure. A few seconds of silence passed before the two looked at each other. Slowly, the farmer's face evolved into a look of shock and disbelief, while the dressmaker's turned into joy and pride. Did he just say, oh, Applejack? There was more cringing and squeezing of the earth pony. Darling, I'm so proud of you. You brought out your cultured side, and you shone like a star. And now we're both going to be heading for the expedition together. There was a groan. He actually invited me. But of course he did, AJ. You made a glowing, exemplary impression on him, and he couldn't help but be swayed, sampling your wares. And now our next stop is one of the richest and influential conferences in all of Equestria, outside of the gala. I know, came back the drawl, back in full force. She managed to peel the white pony off of her long enough to catch her breath and check her person for bruises. And believe me when I say getting to go to the EACE is gonna be one of Sweet Apple Acre's finest moments, but I think I'd probably best leave the theatre talk behind. You can't, came an explanation. Applejack, these are high-class ponies. They'll be expecting nothing less than the best from you. From both of us. Self-consciously, a hairbrush was levitated over before it began combing at the unicorn's purple locks. If you drop your culture training, even for a second at the expedition, we will be sure to be chased out. You can't be serious, the earth pony retorted, an eyebrow arched in disbelief. Nothing like that ever happened at the gala. Oh, we had far worse things to worry about that night, a roll of the eyes. But that's besides the point. The reality of our situation is rather simple, if you must know. Applejack reached behind to unhitch the element from around her neck before looking at it. Slowly it dawned on her exactly what her friend had meant. You mean, since I talked to him like that? Rarity nodded as she took the necklace back and put it away. From now on, we are going to practice that voice, young lady. Mr. Marmalade will be certain to spread word far and wide about the impeccably cultured mistress known as Applejack, that he met today at the Carousel Boutique. She levelled a gaze at the blonde pony, who found herself sweating slightly at the prospect. And you don't want to make a bad impression on your potential clientele at the expedition, do you? It was that moment, and truly then, that the full weight of what the simple country pony had gotten into sunk into her mind. You mean to say I gotta talk like a full-blooded Manhattanite for the whole expedition? From the rooster crow till the cows come home? Darling, the expedition runs for 3 whole days. 3 whole days? Her green eyes widened with panic as her imagination ran away from her. 3 days of not getting herself kicked out of the convention. 3 days of talking to rich and mighty folks. 3 days of wearing makeup and dresses. 3 days away from a rightful spot at the farm. But worst of all, 3 days of speaking in a voice that was not her. I can't do it, Rarity. Y'all gotta believe me. I just can't do it. She found herself on her rear knees in front of the white unicorn, the expression on her face not unlike one pleading for her life. Y'all may as well have me killed by suffocation. I can't possibly live a whole 3 days talking like I never left the city. There's just no way. Applejack, please calm down, the seamstress soothed, masking her surprise at the earth pony's rather exuberant breakdown. She took the mare by the shoulders and held her until her breathing began to level out again. There was a minute or so of silence as the farmer released her panic and gained her senses. It was only then that the unicorn spoke again. That's why, starting from today, you and I will be practicing. We'll work with you and get you used to using your cultured voice more often. When the time comes, you'll be able to handle yourself at the EACE for all 3 days with ease. Applejack sat herself on the floor, hind limbs splayed. She stared at her 4 hooves, before looking back up at her friend. You really reckon I can do this? She asked. Rarity smiled back at her. Don't you fret. Just trust in your teacher, Rarity. And I promise you, you'll breeze into that expedition with nary a worry nor care. Just think of this as repayment from me for the help you'll be giving me. They held each other's gazes for a long while, before the earth pony finally gathered herself back on all 4 hooves. She looked back down at the shop floor in thoughtfulness, before fixing the unicorn with a determined gaze. If y'all, if you really think so, then I'll trust in you. She could only give a pained smile as her friend favoured her with a wide grin. And that's how it went for the following days leading up to the convention. Applejack would arrive and see the designs that Rarity was working on, giving her comments and opinions on whether or not an outfit would appeal to a farmer, work pony, gardener or not. And then, once they had decided on a good look for a suit or dress, all attention would shift to the orange filly herself as they spent an hour having her speak in her sophisticated voice. So, Rarity exclaimed, seated at a tea table, a cup of Darjeeling levitating in front of her. How have things been going at the farm? Oh, they have been going quite well, Applejack replied, a biscotti cookie between her hooves as she studied it. There was no trace of her farm-hand drawl as she continued. Applebloom recently saw a number of missing planks from the side of the barn, and before she gained the attention of Big Macintosh or I, she had set out repairing the damage herself. Oh, such an industrious little filly, indeed. She made no mention of it afterwards either, until I came in from the field and saw the fresh paint. She was afraid I would be mad, but... She stopped as she noticed her companion was giving her a look. What? Did I slip up again? A hoof pointed at her. You used one of your compounded, non-adverb shorthands again. The field is the proper usage. She sighed and leaned on the table, eyes redirected at her biscuit, before taking a bite out of it and munching with her mouth open. Just a little drip. The unicorn rolled her blue eyes. It's a biscotti, dear. It's supposed to be dipped. And usually you only dip it in coffee. Now do please mind your manners. The cowgirl groaned, before sitting back straight and swallowing her cookie, taking a sip of tea right afterward. She cleared her throat again and closed her eyes. I apologize for my momentary lapse in etiquette. No harm done, Rarity beamed, her mood instantly improved. We all have our moments. Now then, please, do continue with your story. Applebloom didn't tell you about her repairs. Right. Applejack began again, only a trace of drawl in that first word. Well, I began inquiring around the farm about the new planks. Big Macintosh had no idea what it was about, and we both knew that Granny Smith was not in good enough health to possibly do them herself. We even hunted down the hired help, Caramel, to see if she knew anything about it, but he didn't. And did Applebloom come forward then? Well, she was the last one we had left to ask, and I remembered the repair work she had done on the old treehouse. It took a little coaxing, but she confessed to it. And you showed her you weren't mad, right? Darn tootin', she blasted out, chest swelling with pride. I right out and told her that anything else we found broke down, she twere more than welcome to take a shot at fixing it up. She may not be a carpenter, but she sure showed she knew how to handle a hammer and saw. I even told her, The farm pony blushed and looked down as she realized her lapse in speech. Sorry about that. Oh no, it's quite all right, the unicorn said through a strained smile. She couldn't really blame her friend for falling back into her accent. She was proud of her sister after all. Still, with the southern drawl, came back all the grammar complications and mangled words that made her put her teeth on edge. I think that's enough for today, she continued, staring up from the table and trotting back towards one of the clothed mannequins. I need to finish the last few stitches on this outfit, and then we'll have 6 of them done. Not bad for a week's plus of work, don't you think? If you say so, Applejack replied as she stood herself and trotted to another mannequin to retrieve her hat. Silently, she was relieved to have the session over with, though she felt bad about letting a friend down. I'm awful sorry about that, Rarity. I only fancy talked for about 2 days when I went to Manhattan, you know. It's no problem, the white pony assured, though her face was still directed towards the dress. It takes time, and we still have a few days left before the expedition starts. I'm certain we'll have you used to speaking without an accent well before that time. The farm pony tossed her head on before she directed a glare back to her friend. I told ya, I don't have an accent. Yes, I know, came the reply. A hoof waved dismissively in a direction. In the meantime, I think you'd best get your wares organized. Mr. Marmalade will be bringing a chariot to take our supplies to the expedition the day before. That reminds me, where is the EACE being held this year? Oh, it's some city out in the heartland of Equestria. Oklahoma City, I think. Right in the middle of cow country, the blonde mused, a hoof stroking her chin in contemplation. Lot of farming and growing up around these parts. You're sure you even need to use my set advice there? Now, Applejack, don't you go looking for excuses now. The white pony brought her head up from her work and gave her a stern look. Just because it's being held in a centre of agriculture industry does not mean the ponies there will speak as plainly as you do. Besides, you've already made so much progress, it'd be a shame to let it waste away now. There was a sigh as Applejack lowered her head. I know. I guess I'll see you tomorrow then. Bright and early as usual, right? Rarity's look softened as the farmer clocked towards the door. Oh, of course, dear. Now don't be so glum. Just remember, this is all for your own good. There was barely a perceivable nod as the earth pony walked out of the boutique. Out in the fresh air and sunshine again, she felt her spirits pick up as she began to make her way back to Sweet Apple Acres. She is right, she found herself musing. She's trying her best to help me and make a good impression on the rich folks, and she already helped me get a spot at the expo. I just need to start dragging my hooves about it. She looked up in the sky as she took a deep breath and sighed. I just can't help but feel this whole high-class thing is being dishonest with myself. The day arrived. Within 24 hours a pair of wagons would appear, bearing Mr. Marmalade's cutie mark, to unload precious cargo to Oklahoma City. The day after, the Equestrian Agriculture Conference and Expedition would begin. Rarity's boutique had been prepped and locked up, the unicorn herself running around all 10 outfits awaiting unloading. She would add a stitch there, prep a piece of fabric there, and would no doubt be fussing over the garments well until the day the convention doors opened. Occasionally her eyes would glance over to a box she had prepared the past 2 weeks in secret. I just know she's going to look fabulous in it, she thought to herself. Applejack, in the meantime, had her hooves full. She currently had 4 pies in the oven. Granny Smith was working on the last of the caramel apples. Big Mac was out back, picking the best-looking ripe apples that he could find for display, and Apple Blue was currently trying her best to convince her big sister that she should come along too. But sis, I could help. I know I can. Y'all just have to give me the chance, she shouted, maid bobbing as she practically bounced in place beside her sibling in the Apple family kitchen. The farm filly couldn't talk on account of her mouth being full of pot pad, and she hoisted a hot apple pie out of the oven. As soon as it was settled on a cooling rack, however, she was quick to give a response. Sorry, Sugar Cube, but I barely managed to get my own self attached to this here expo, and there's nowhere I could ask Mr. Marmalade to back our waterboard pony. Plus, not to go robbing chickens droppings in the laundry, but I still remember what happened last time y'all helped me sell apples. Oh, the yellow pony whined, her head and eyes dropping low. I thought you wouldn't mention that again. Applejack chuckled before rubbing her sister's head. I tell you what, run upstairs and get watched up. If nothing else, you can have your helping taking pies to the wagon once it gets here. Sure thing, sis, the filly exclaimed, eyes all alight once more before she scampered out the kitchen. There was a soft chuckle from a corner of the room as Granny Smith watched her go, a line of caramel apples building on the table. And sakes, the young'un sure knows how to scuttle, don't he? She sure does, the farm pony agreed, a smile on her face. It held there for a second before it collapsed as she turned to her grandmother. Am I making the right choice here, Granny? This could happen and put the farm on stable ground finally. But to make it happen, I'm going to have to act like a city pony again. And I don't remember how crossways y'all were when I first went to Manhattan. There was a wave of a hoof as the old mare pushed at her. 'Tis all in the past, AJ. Y'all have to do what you have to do. The only thing I draw a line at is when they make you put on a bear suit and do the will of the dervish. I'll have no part of those stallion grind hypes, you hear? I hear, Granny, Applejack agreed, though her face was a picture of amused bewilderment. Don't worry. All we're doing is heading out to Oklahoma City and selling apples. We're bound to make some dough for sure. Granny simply nodded with a smile as she picked up another apple and dipped it in caramel goodness. As she sat it down to harden, she fixed her granddaughter with another look. Have those speech classes your fans been giving you going? The orange horse almost dropped the next pie she had been hauling out of the oven. As soon as her mouth was free, she stammered, pretty okay. I think I can handle them big city folks without making myself look like too much like a fool now. Can you show me? Beads of sweat collected on her brow. Her granny was asking her to talk sophisticated for her. Well, it's Granny Smith asking, can't rightly say no to her. She brought a hoof to her chest as she cleared her throat. If you want, Granny Smith, I have to say I'm not comfortable talking like this. I've been rehearsing strictly for the expedition, but, well, since you asked. There was a gallop of small hooves before Apple Bloom reappeared at the kitchen door, her mane hastily combed and still slightly damp. Hey, sis, where do y'all want me to put the pies when the wagons get here? Applejack turned to her sister with a smile. Oh, you need not worry about that yet, Apple Bloom. They probably won't arrive until later this evening. The smaller filly stared blankly at her big sister before she spoke. Applejack, what the hey happened to your voice? There was a second of confusion, followed by a widening of the eyes and blushing of the cheeks. Oh, sorry about that, Sugar Cube. I was just practicing, you see. You know, like... She has to talk like a city pony at the expo, Granny Smith spoke up, saving her granddaughter. She's done it before, if you all remember. Oh, yeah, Apple Bloom drawled, her eyes widening. When you told us your cutie mark story, is that how you sounded when you visit Aunt and Uncle Orange? Sorta. The orange equine looked to the side, before standing on all four hooves. I trained any good at it at the time, but if I'm to fit in at the expedition without them throwing me out like a barrel of scampi apples, I gotta sound like the rest of the city folk. Oh, if I sound like a city pony, could I come then? I believe I can come along if I sound all high class, yes? There was a round of laughter at Apple Bloom's poor imitation, leaving the filly with an embarrassed blush and set of downturned ears. She squeaked, however, as she was suddenly embraced by her sister. Oh, don't be too quick to try and pick up on something I done rightly like myself. Let me tell yez, it ain't no fun at all. If you say so, sis, she sighed. She was released, and she headed out to the front door to watch for their transportation. Granny Smith couldn't help but laugh a few minutes more. The blonde could tell if she was laughing about her sister's eagerness or her own reluctance. Deciding not to raise the issue, she sighed as she grabbed the pot pad again to extract the last apple pie. She didn't hear the larger set of hoof steps working their way into the kitchen. Oh, there you are, came an exclamation. Applejack flinched and dropped her pad as she recognized the voice of the white mare she had spent the last 2 weeks with. Hey, Rarity, she greeted as she turned around. Twasn't expecting y'all round so early. The carts haven't arrived yet, have they? No, they haven't, the unicorn conceded. But that wasn't the point of why I came. You see, well, there was a pawing at the floor. It was only now that the farmer realized that there was a saddlebag strapped to her friend's back. Sticking out of the left bag was a large pink box. Rarity, she began, her eyes widening. Yeah, I didn't. The blue eyes looked back up with a sheepish expression. I wanted to repay you for everything you've done, so I went and... Instead of continuing, Rarity's horn lit up as the package floated out of her bag. It levitated towards the earth pony before the top lifted up, displaying its contents. She could tell this much: it was white and frilly. "To match your exquisite voice, dear," came the explanation. "Made especially for the EACE. Applejack was floored and sweating. She had originally been intending on wearing her gala outfit, but as she thought about it, it made sense that her friend would pull something like this. She began to look around in a panicked manner for an exit. Any exit out of the room. Busting out the window and getting glass embedded in her flank seemed like the better option when compared to wearing Rarity's newest frou-frou concoction. She faced Granny Smith for help, but all she got from that direction was a look of amusement. The old tart was enjoying her discomfort. Finally she sighed, defeated, before looking back at the unicorn. "Thank you kindly, Rarity. Guessing you all want me to try it on before we go." She got a grin. "Applejack, you read my mind. Now let's go upstairs, dear," Rarity said as she turned around. There was a look back along with a proud smile. "We'll make a high-class diva out of you yet, darling." The Applebucker's ears drooped as she followed her friend out. The elderly green pony simply watched them go, before she let out that snicker she had building up. "Phew, we finally made it. Took us long enough." "Oh yes, but it was all worth it." I sure hope it is." Rarity simply beamed as she took in the scene before her. The trip to Oklahoma City itself had been uneventful enough. To every pony's relief, their wares had been checked in and their stalls found. Applejack had told Mr. Marmalade that she didn't require much space, her stand not being wider than 2 ponies' lengths. As a result, Rarity's display took up the majority of the space. Not that it didn't need it. She had put each and every outfit she had prepared up on a pedestal with lights with 10 outfits. And with 10 outfits that took up a fair amount of room. Now both Unicorn and Earth Pony stood outside their respective vendors, taking in the multitude of ponies that trotted around the expedition area. As of yet, the doors had not opened, and so the ones that were milling around were either organizers or were setting up their own stalls. Rarity herself was adorned in a gown that was cut short enough to show a bit of tail and hind leg. There were points of amber lined around her neck, as a shinier fabric traced the hems. Applejack pawed at the ground restlessly as she looked herself over. Before they had even entered the building, her friend had insisted she be in character. Her blonde locks were once again done up in a mountain fashion, and the dress, it fit well and loosely, and the farm pony still felt it was squeezing the life out of her. It was a Southern belle's dress, with enough of a bouffant in the back to make her feel like a whale, dainty ruffled sleeves, and to top it off, a pearl necklace that weighed like a ball and chain. She desperately wished for her hat. "I don't know about you," the white mare gushed, "but I'm so stoked for this. To use a word from Rainbow Dash's vocabulary." She brought another brush to her, nervously grooming her mane once more. "Our names are going to be on the top of every rich pony's list." I hear you," the farmer replied, trying her best not to let her speech slip this time. Slip, and she may ruin any chance of profit for the farm. "So many ponies here. I would think at least one of them would appreciate a good apple." And dress or two." She gave a look at her friend for the interjection. "I would still like to get out and about before the day is done, though. I spy a plough display over in that corner, and I do not see one that would be right for Big Mac's size." "Oh, you'll have plenty of time for that, dear," Rarity assured. "Maybe we can get some time to ourselves on the 3rd day. Hopefully they won't have sold out of any—" "Ladies," came a grandiose voice. They both looked up in time to see Mr. Marmalade approaching the two. "So glad you were able to make it. Oh, Madam Rarity, Madam Applejack, you both are simply looking fabulous." He took a look at the 2 mares and the stalls behind them before turning to look at the scenery around them. "Isn't this all just so grand? All the wares to be seen, all the innovations, all the wonderful ponies. This is sure to be the best expedition yet." Applejack gagged on the inside of the words, and a quick glance at Rarity told her friend was thinking much the same thing. However, they quickly put aside their feelings of doom as the white mare spoke up. "Oh, you're absolutely right, darling, and my friend, I owe it all to you for our chance to attend this prestigious affair." I concur," the orange filly quipped. I should have asked Rarity to have taught me some fancy words too. The stallion favoured the both of them with a wide smile, before turning all business. The doors will be opening in less than 3 minutes. Have you fillies got anything? Yes? Good to hear. Now, get ready at your stations. Those ponies will be coming in like a tidal wave, I swear. He took this moment to clutch at each pony's hoof with his own, leaving each with a slight blush on their faces. I wish the both of you tremendous luck today. Let's hope we all do well. Now, I must rush to the opening ceremony. Until later, my fillies. Toodaloo. Toodaloo, they both echoed once more, as the brown horse galloped away. They stood there for a second before facing each other. They could hear the background hubbub beginning to increase in volume. Applejack, Rarity began. Good luck to you. Your apples will be sure to sell here. I know they will. Thanks, she replied, city voice still in place. I wish you good luck as well, and again, thank you for giving me this chance. It's no trouble at all, darling, the unicorn said, as she turned to enter a stall. We'll talk again soon. Until then, remember, no accent. The apple bucker nodded to a friend as she took position behind her own stand. As she trotted, however, she let a mumble escape her lips. I don't got no hay-tossin' accent. Business was indeed far better than it had ever been at the Gala. Flow kept up from a steady direction, which worked to Applejack's advantage. Ponies would run into Rarity's boutique, stand first, mill around or buy something in there, and then come out starving, spotting and making a beeline for sweet Appleacre's stand. Apparently being a clothes horse made you hungry. She noticed that a fair number of her customers were farm ponies like herself. She was tempted to keep her guard down when around these friendly faces. However, she kept her guise of sophistication as she greeted them. She sold them apples and chatted. Half the day was already gone when she hauled out her third bushel of red delicious onto the stand. As she turned back around, she noticed there was already a small 2-pony line waiting for her. Oh, she exclaimed, I beg your pardon, I was just getting some more stock out. The farmer quickly trotted back behind her stand as the 2 fillies stepped up. Sweet Appleacre's fresh farm apples. Would you care to try some? Said the left pony. He was a light grey earth pony with a straight-haired charcoal mane, purple eyes gazing over the wares. What do you think, Sissy Pie? Those fritters sure look good. I don't know, replied the other filly. She was a slate blue with a dusty grey mane that was cut short over her own golden eyes. The caramel apples look the best to me. How much for one of those? 5 bits, Applejack replied in an even voice. And the fritters are 7 apiece. However, if you want, I could let you have both for 10 bits. She gave them a half-littered smile, which they both lit up at. We'll take 'em. Money was deposited, and apples were given. They proceeded to dig into them right there in front of the stand. She didn't mind. She loved seeing ponies enjoy her apples. This was good, the grey mare mumbled around her fritter. She swallowed before continuing. We should bring some back for big Sissy Pie. We should, the blue one agreed. Do you have any pink ladies? She would love that. The farmer smirked. With all the talk of pies you two have been going on about, I'm surprised you all haven't asked one of those. They both looked back at her. She brought her hooves to her mouth as she realized what she'd done. I'm so sorry, she gushed, now panicked like never before. Please don't tell anyone I slipped. It was an accident, I swear. I'll even give you free apples. You can even... Whoa. The dusty grey pony soothed. Calm down. We won't tell any pony, will we, Sissy Pie? That's right, the darker mare agreed. If it means that much to you, we'll keep quiet. Besides, the grey pony continued, there's nothing wrong with being honest with yourself. That hit a chord inside Applejack. She hadn't given thought to it in that manner since that day a week ago. The more she thought about it, the more it ate at her. Here she was, at the biggest farmers' convention in all of Equestria, and what was she doing? Wearing a ballroom gown and speaking in a hobnob voice in an attempt to fit in. Miss? Are you all right? She shook her head as she brought her mind back to the here and now. Oh yes, I am. Thank you. I'm awfully sorry about this. This is just my one big chance to help my farm, and I don't want to mess it up. We could understand that, the darker of the 2 equines replied. We come from a rock farm. And unless the rocks are pretty or valuable, we don't make a lot of money either. Her sister nodded in agreement. Ouch, the orange one responded. She looked over her own wares before ducking under the strand to retrieve a bag, filling it with rose-tinted apples. You know what? Here we have a bag of pink ladies just as ordered. And an apple pie too on the house. Their eyes widened. Oh, we can't possibly. Don't go stammering on me now. She spoke to the two, her twang briefly resurfacing. She gave them a thankful look. Just think of these as gifts for your sissy pie. I bet she'll love them. They looked at each other before nodding and giving smiles to their vendor. The slate one carefully placed a pie on her back as she gushed. Oh boy, Maggie Pie, this expo really is turning out to be the best. You said it, Inky Pie, her sister cheered, placing the bag of apples into a saddlebag. I just know Pinky is going to love these. Thank you, madame. Thank you, ma'am. Applejack waved at both of them farewell as they blended back into the stream of ponies, clopping through the aisles. Her mind was still a whirl with the thoughts the two had unwittingly imparted onto her, but she shook her head, deciding that thinking on that track wasn't going to help sell apples now, and she would need to upsell now after having given the pie. Wait. Pink ladies? She muttered to herself. Rock Farm? Inky? Maggie? Pinky? Pies? Are you certain? As certain as I can be. When we get to Ponyville, she'll be telling us all about the pie her sisters gave her. How uncanny! Rarity exclaimed. To think we've run into some of the Pinkie Pie's family here at the expedition. Applejack rolled her eyes as she rested her head on her stand's counter. The stock that she had set aside for today had run empty. Only a half-full bushel of galas left on display. It was getting close to the evening, and she was quite thankful for it. The day had worn hard on her. Though she couldn't complain, her money bucket was filled to the brim with bits. Well, they are farmers after all, she replied, looking around at the ponies still milling about. They may show up again, so keep your eyes peeled. They may want to buy a dress next time. Speaking of which, how has your business done today? Oh, simply amazing! I was quite surprised that the redesigned outfit we did for you was the most popular on the list. Got no less than 15 orders for it. For a second, the unicorn looked faint before she recovered and continued. And your gala dress was such a hit as well. And of course, I took plenty of custom orders too. I say, Applejack, if this keeps up, I'm going to have to actually start hiring help for the boutique. That's a good sign, the farmer assured, lifting her head slightly. If I have any leftover bits after getting the farm fixed up, I might hire on some help myself. The acres could really use it. There was a nod before the white mare found herself stretching, joints popping as she worked her limbs. My stars, it's been a long day. I think I'm ready to close up and walk around and sightsee. How about you? Sounds good to me, Applejack replied, as she stood up and took a hanging rope in her mouth, bringing the stall's sign to collapse inward on the counter. If we're lucky, they may still have those plows in stock. She got a nod as the unicorn's horn lit up, drawing the curtains closed on her own stall. After a couple seconds of securing booths and packing their gaze, the two fillies began walking side by side, slipping into the stream of equines that were still wandering about at this late hour. Applejack, Rarity began, causing the orange one to glance at her friend. I just want to tell you how proud I am that you've kept up your classical trading for the whole of today. She turned those sapphire blue eyes on her, a giddy grin plastered on her face. And to think we still have 2 more days. Keep this up and I promise you, your future will be so much brighter. The farm filly's ears turned downwards. Once again, the words of that grey mare echoed in her head. I hate this, she thought to herself, but Rarity's still right, and I can't let her down now. Just 2 more days, she murmured. Then I can put this voice behind me. A white ear flicked back. Oh dear, of course you can go back to speaking plainly again, but not until we're out of these hollowed halls. Besides, I don't think you'll want to throw it away entirely. There are various other conventions all over Equestria, and a pony of our class could very well be entitled to be invited to every one. Her eyes sparkled at the prospect. In contrast, the colour drained from AJ's face. More parties? More speaking like a Maid Boysells, came a familiar booming voice. The two of them jumped and whirled to find Mr. Marmalade trotting up to them rapidly. How was today for you both? I hope your enterprises saw adequate fortune? Oh, they most certainly did, good sir, Rarity cooed, slipping into her most relaxed and noble tone. The ponies of Yoklahoma City have such exquisite tastes. I wasn't certain if the dresses that Applejack and I designed would be such a hit, but they were. Splendid, the stallion grinned, before turning his attention towards the earth pony. And you, my dear, how well did your apple goods fare? They did well, Applejack stuttered, trying to recover from her earlier surprise. Far better than they ever did when I went to the Grand Galloping Gala. I'll be able to make some much-needed improvements to the farm once the expedition is over. This brought a bigger smile to Marmalade's face than she thought was healthy. That's just what I wanted to hear, Madam Applejack. You're the perfect pony, a respectable citizen with a deep tie to a farm. You're just what I'm looking for. Hurry, come with me. He did an about-face and began galloping, ponies scattering to the left and right as he ploughed a path through them. The two females were left gaping for a second, before they hurried to catch up with him. Mr. Marmalade, what's all this about? Rarity called out, trying her best to run elegantly without causing too much bounce in her outfit. An opening speech, that's what, came the answer. In about 20 minutes the last panel of the night will begin, on the relations of the agriculture industry with that of its consumer base. Originally, we had another speaker to open it, but unfortunately he was unable to make it in time. Instantly, my thoughts turned to you, Madam Applejack, for you appear to be closely connected with the workings of the farmland for one so cultured. Applejack was already having enough trouble not tripping over her dress. This bit of information did nothing to help matters. You want me to speak? She managed to squeak out, voice faltering between Manhattan and Appaloosa. Indeed, nothing incredibly long, mind you. All you need to do is tell us a little bit about yourself, about your farm, and about the time you've had here so far. You know, give us your honest opinions. Rarity turned to gaze at her friend as they ran. With a supportive look, it went unnoticed, as the farmer had her eyes unfocused, staring into nothing as they made their way to the hall. Okay, 1 minute. Good luck, darling. But... Applejack barely managed to stammer as she was shoved onto the darkened stage. Even with the lights down, the blonde filly could see the hall was practically packed with ponies. She was shaking in her hooves, and the murmur of the room was practically a roar in her ears. She looked off to the side once more, not certain if it had been Marmalade or Rarity that had shoved her out there. They were giving her hopeful and supporting gazes. Remember, the unicorn whispered, your speech. She could only gulp as she turned back towards the stage. There was a podium right in the centre, and she dutifully, though reluctantly, trotted up to it. As soon as she had her 4 hooves on the desk, a spotlight flared to life, bathing the orange pony in a brilliant glare, causing her pearls and dresses to glisten. Out in the audience there was a bout of cheering, as well as a few whistles of appreciation. Off to her side, she thought she heard Rarity sighing in contentment. Greetings, she managed to squeeze out. There was another wave of cheers, accompanied by hoof stomps and claps. I am here in placement of Minister Juniper Jams, who was unable to attend this year's Equestrian Agriculture Conference and Expedition. Her heart eased its pounding in her head as she tuned the crowd out, letting her own words fill her ears. Mr. Marmalade has asked that I open up our talk today instead, so let me tell you a bit about myself. My name is Applejack. I run a farm, not unlike many of you here today. She got a few cheers of support at that, and at least 3 right arms. Many of you may have heard of Sweet Apple Acres. Why, I believe some of you have even been to my stall today, haven't you? A good portion of the crowd erupted in yet another cheer, louder than the last. This brought a smile to her face, as her nerves finally managed to calm down. With the calm, however, came a loosening of discipline. She felt her tongue wanting to move in traitorous ways, her lips to make sounds not fit for noble halls. She smacked herself dryly as she waited for the cheer to subside. A glass of water would be heavenly right about now. I'm glad you all enjoyed them, she continued. Once she could hear herself think again, trained voice still in place. It really warms my heart to see that. The Apple family has been in the apple business for generations, and you can find apples grown by us in almost every corner of Equestria. Sweet Apple Acres, in particular, is based right out of Ponyville, where we keep some of our most cherished family traditions alive. She closed her eyes as she thought back to the farm. For years, we've put the same thing into all our apples that our forefathers did before us. Tender, loving care, good and responsible practices, and lots of down-to-earth, hard, honest work. She opened her eyes. She looked at the crowd. She then looked back down at her dress. A farmer pony, dressed up as a frou-frou pony, talking like a frou-frou pony to a bunch of other frou-frou ponies at a farmer's convention? Her eye twitched. This was stupid. This was more than just stupid. This just wasn't right. Down in the audience, a dusty grey filly eeped as she felt a tingle go over her body. This was quickly followed by an all-body jitter as she began to vibrate in place. Sissy pie, she stuttered, voice vibrating as she did. Something's about to happen. Inky Pie watched her sister's antics. Her eyes widened. Are you sure, Maggie? I haven't felt anything yet. Back in Ponyville, inside Sugar Cube Quarter, the bakery's #1 employee was in the process of handing a tray of meringue cookies over to an eager purple dragon, when the treats suddenly vibrated off their platter. Green eyes widened in panic as the Earth Pony began to shudder in place. Pinky! Spike yelped. What's going on? Is something going to happen? Is it twilight? I don't know, the pink filly stammered, but I can tell it's not twilight. Who then? The dragon panicked. Rarity? Rainbow Dash? Or Fluttershy? Did Fluttershy explode? Applejack. At a rock farm somewhere between Ponyville and Cloudsdale, an elderly Earth Pony couple leaned back in their rocking chairs, sighing in relief at the peace and quiet they now had all to themselves. The tall brown stallion closed his eyes, hat drooping over his face. You know, I may not be an up-to-date pony, but I have to thank today's world for giving the kids a distraction. I'll say, the green mare replied, her hooves busy in darning a sock. Inky and Maggie are probably having themselves a blast. There was a chuckle. They've always had a blast, ever since Pinky got her cutie mark. Sometimes I wonder if they'll really stay, or if they'll follow their sister and move back to Ponyville. We should visit Pinky, Mother Pie stated, looking evenly over her spectacles. Ponyville's not a bad place, you know. I've been there. We could always drop in on the apple farm. See if old Tart Smith's still hanging. She paused at her rocking. Her eyes widened. Papa Pie kept his eyes evenly on her, even when her tail began twitching, followed by her backside, proceeding up her spine towards her forehooves, ending at her head as she shimmied in an impromptu seizure. Who is it this time? He asked, only mildly curious. Can't tell, he stated, her own voice remaining calm even as she shook. But they're in Oklahoma City. Oh, wait, Inky stated. She felt the tingling herself, and then before she knew it, she was imitating her sister in her vibrating pose. There it goes. Why are you always so late? Maggie questioned her sister, managing to raise an eyebrow through her shaking. Applejack looked down, her mind apparently made up. She looked over to the side and caught Rarity's eyes. She gave the unicorn a sad look as she said in perfect Manhattanite, I'm sorry, Sugar Cube. And then she turned back to the crowd. But I can't keep this haystack and act up anymore. There was a ripple of amazement that caused through the crowd. The white filly's eyes shrunk in panic. Mr. Marmalade kept his silence as he watched the apple bucket proceed to rant. I got invited out here to this expedition, all 'cause I had a fancy voice. I've got to tell you right now, that voice tain't me. This is me. Y'all want to know how the Apple family gets the apples so good? Let me tell you. Me and my big brother Mac go out there, and we bark those trees ourselves. I tain't no fancy apple baron. I like to get my hooves dirty. I'm a farmer, and this con's supposed to be for farmers. So how come I gotta break out my Manhattanite frou-frou talk? I tried to be sophisticated once, a long time ago. 'Twasn't me then, and it sure tain't me now. So go on. Y'all know I tain't fancy a frou-frou, a high class, or what have you. I don't want to be one no more. Throw me out. Toss me in the mud for all I care. Just as long as I can stop lying, be true, and sound like myself. She panted, her frustrations now fully vented, the hall still echoing with her words. She allowed her green eyes to travel over the hushed occupants of the room. She allowed herself another glance over to Rarity, who appeared to be in the midst of a heart attack. The expression on Marmalade's face remained unreadable. Well, 'twere a good run, she thought to herself. I won't be sticking round for the other 2 days, but that's all right. I made enough today to do to fix it up on the farm. If I never get invited to anywhere ever again, I think I'll be able to live. Sorry about that, Rarity, but I'm done living a lie. The orange mare stood there, in the silence, the lone spotlight still beating down on her. She awaited the audience's reaction. She didn't have to wait very long. As one, each and every pony in the room let out a single word. Hoo-wee! Followed by someone in the back yelling out, "'Bout darn time, some pony said." And then the murmur came rolling back, but this time with a different flavour to its melody. Rarity's expression shifted from panic to outright shock, as she noticed that each and every single equine in the room had suddenly lost any traces of cultured upbringing in their voices. The conversation of the hall was dominated with the thick, syrupy drawl of a southern accent. Ponies were sighing with relief, hugging each other, laughing and bucking with joy, as the earlier tension completely dissolved away, leaving behind an air of gratitude as they all relaxed, letting their natural speech and voices shine through. Applejack, quite obviously, had not expected this outcome either. She remained rooted to her spot behind the pedestal, eyes wide and unbelieving, jaw slack and hanging open. She barely registered the approach of 2 ponies up to her right side. Applejack! She slowly turned her head. Her friend stood there beside her, the unicorn's face a mixture of emotions warring for domination. Shock, pride, joy, and sorrow. Her heart weighed heavy in her own chest as she took it in. That was beautiful, Applejack, Rarity began, stretching her hoof out and placing it on the farmer's shoulder. I'm sorry, I had no idea. She turned to look back at the crowd, yee-haws and whoops rising from its surface every now and then. I really had no idea. She looked back. How can I ever make it up to you? Unbidden, tears began to spring from the corners of the orange one's eyes. She raised her hooves up and unclasped her pearl necklace that had felt so much like a burden. As she handed them back to Rarity, she brought her hooves back to her mane and tugged at the bouffant. It gave way, blonde strands cascading down her back as she gave a shake of her head. The weight of the world off her shoulders, she looked back at the white mare, head turned downwards, tears still flowing. I want my hat back. The unicorn found herself tearing up as well, as she walked forward and nuzzled her friend. Okay, dear, let's go and get your hat. The restaurant was abuzz with laughter and the twang of cow talk. The waiters had been taken aback when the conventioneers came in sounding like southern folks, compared to the cultured tone their customers had the years previous. Business was still business, however, and they would be mad to turn it away for any reason, especially if one of their customers was Mr. Mango Marmalade and his party of 4, who were currently occupying a private booth secluded from the rest of the restaurant. A steady stream of hay fries and bean burgers flowed into the booth, as its occupants relaxed from the harrowing day beforehand. Whoosh! Applejack breathed, coming up for air from her chocolate oat malt. Sure feels good to eat like a real pony again. She gave her mane another shake, her customary hat and hairband back in place, with nary a sign of dress to be seen. I'd forgotten how hungry being a sophisticated pony made ya. I can see that, Rarity stated evenly, though her eyes were still wide as she noted that the farmer was now in her 4th shake. I've never had such a reaction myself, I must admit. I suppose it differs from pony to pony. It really does, came a voice from the unicorn's left. She turned to face Maggie Pie and her sister, the both of them slowly but steadily sharing and working through a stack of fries. Back on the farm, before she got her cutie mark, Pinky barely ate 4 muffins a day. Afterwards, however, she couldn't seem to get enough food in her. It's one of the reasons she moved away. One of the many reasons, Inky spoke, rolling her eyes. But that's all beside the point, isn't it? Mr. Marmalade nodded, sitting at the far end next to Applejack. The expedition folks were all like me, the orange filly stated, her mind still reeling from the thought. They all thought that if they went and spoke plain like, they'd get kicked out too. So they never said nothing otherwise, and this has been going on for so long. Well, it kind of got out of hand, didn't it? She turned to the browed stallion again, who only dipped his head once more with a sheepish expression. It rather caught me off guard, Rarity confessed as she daintily sipped her lemon tea. I mean, I had no idea all the sophisticated and cultured airs that every pony was putting on were so forced. I had taken the entire thing for granted, being the kind of pony I am. She found herself blushing, realizing that she was now a minority, a city pony in a town full of cowfolk. We saw it coming, Inky quipped, her mouth still full of fries. Before we came to Miss Applejack's stand, the last 2 stands we visited also slipped their speech. The apple bucker gaped at the 2 rock farmers. I was your 3rd one, and y'all didn't tell me? How could we? The lighter of the 2 mares responded. They asked us to keep quiet too, same as you did. She blushed as she looked down. Makes sense considering. We were all kinda scared, at least I know I was. She looked up as she felt her shuffling. The white unicorn edged herself closer to the earth pony's side as she locked eyes. Applejack, I am so sorry. I had no idea that you felt so oppressed by all the culture that I was trying to help you with. I had no intention of instilling that kind of fear in you. I should have really known better than to force something onto you that you're not. I was just... She turned her sapphire eyes downward. I was really excited to have some pony to be high class with. Can you ever forgive me? Applejack let a smile come to her face as she nudged Rarity's cheek. I forgive you, Sugarcube. I know you're just trying to help. Just got carried away like the rest of us. She smiled as she spotted the relief on her friend's face. And hey, maybe sometime if you'll be really needing it, I could be frou-frou for a day. That sound good? She asked before holding her hoof out. It was met with a white one in a clop, and they both shook on it. And I promise, the seamstress replied, I won't bother you any more about your accent. That is... There was a chuckle as the blonde tilted her hat back. Y'all can call it an accent if you want. To me and all the folks round here, 'tis just talking normal like. There was a round of clapping that made both farmer and dressmaker blush slightly before they turned back to their food. So, the lighter of the 2 grey fillies started, this means the EACA is still going on for the rest of the weekend, right? Marmalade nodded with a smile. And we get to keep both our stands? Applejack asked, her face a picture of hopefulness. He nodded once more with a grin. Even though we may or may not sound cultured? Rarity quipped, a look of curiosity on her features. Mr. Marmalade closed his eyes, before opening them and his mouth to speak for the first time that evening. Yup, he replied, in a drawl that would have made even Big Macintosh proud. Finn,